Okay, so I want to start today with a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to feel uncomfortably familiar for a lot of you.
Oh, I'm ready to feel called out.
Right. So picture this. You're sitting on your couch. It's late, maybe 9:30 p.m. You're a little tired, maybe a bit bored.
TV's on in the background, phone in hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you open an app or browser tab, doesn't matter which. You have absolutely no intention of buying anything. You're just looking.
Just scrolling.
Mm.
The modern version of window shopping,
Mhm.
but the store has, everything in the world.
And then 20 minutes later, somehow your credit card information has been entered. You've bought I don't know, a specialized coffee grinder
Oh.
or noise-canceling headphones.
Some skincare serum that promises to fix everything.
Yes. And the weirdest part is, in that moment, as you click place order, you feel this real sense of accomplishment, like you just solved a problem.
And then the box shows up 3 days later, and you just look at it and think, why? Why did I do that?
That is the exact question we are digging into today. Because we love to think of ourselves as rational, Homo economicus, making logical choices.
Right.
But the stack of research we're exploring for this deep dive, all focused on the psychology of spending, just completely shatters that idea.
It really does. That rational actor model
Yeah.
it's basically a fairy tale we tell ourselves. The reality that these sources describe is so much messier.
It's not logic.
No, it's biology. It's emotion. A lot of the time, it's a coping mechanism.
And before we get into the neuroscience, which we are definitely going to do, I think we need to set a ground rule for this deep dive.
Okay.
Because reading through this, I definitely had a few moments where I winced. It is really easy to feel judged.
For sure. But the authors are so clear about this. The goal here is not guilt.
No.
Guilt is actually the enemy. As we'll see, guilt is a stressor. And what does stress do? It triggers more spending. A vicious loop.
So the mission today is awareness over guilt.
Exactly. We're just popping the hood to see how the engine works so that next time you feel that urge, you understand the mechanism. You're not just a passenger.
Okay, let's pop the hood. And we have to start with the engine itself, the brain.
Right.
Most people have heard of dopamine. It's always called the pleasure chemical. You buy something, you get dopamine, you feel good. Simple.
And that is a massive and I'd say dangerous oversimplification.
Why dangerous?
Because it completely misses why we shop in the first place. The source material draws a line between two very different systems in the brain. There's the wanting system and the liking system.
This part really blew my mind. I just assumed they were the same thing. I want a pizza because I like the pizza.
You'd think so, but in the brain, they run on totally different neural pathways. Liking is opioids and endocannabinoids. That's the actual enjoyment when you eat the slice or, wear the new sweater.
Okay.
But wanting, that's all dopamine. And dopamine is not about pleasure. It's about pursuit.
It's the hunting instinct.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a seeking system. Evolution designed it to get you off the couch to find food or a partner. So when you see those headphones online, your brain isn't releasing dopamine to say, hey, those are nice.
What is it saying?
It's creating an itch, a tension. It's saying, if you get that, your life will be better. Go get it.
That makes so much sense. It explains why the anticipation is almost always better than the actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about prediction error, and it just clicked. It explains that letdown feeling perfectly.
Right. Can you break that down?
Yeah. So the dopamine spikes during the hunt, right? It
Yeah.
peaks just before you get the thing. So right when you click buy, you're basically high on the possibility of how great this thing will make your life.
And then it arrives.
And then it arrives, and your brain goes, okay, mission complete, and the dopamine just crashes.
And that's the prediction error. Your brain predicted this huge, life-altering reward. The reality is, it's just a physical object. It's a coffee grinder. It can't possibly live up to that chemical hype.
And right on the heels of that, hedonic adaptation kicks in.
Which is the fancy term for the fact that we just get used to stuff incredibly quickly.
That shiny new car is just the car in a month. The new phone is just my phone.
The baseline just resets.
Yeah.
And because that dopamine rush is gone and the new thing is now normal, the brain immediately starts scanning the horizon for the next target.
It's a treadmill.
It's a biological treadmill. And just realizing that, I think, is the first step toward freedom. You're not broken for wanting more things. You're literally fighting millions of years of programming that says pursuit is survival.
And it can't just be biology, right? Because if it were only dopamine, we'd all be addicted to buying everything all the time. But we have our own specific triggers.
Yes. This is where we move from the engine to the driver. Dopamine provides the fuel, but our emotions are steering the car.
The sources mentioned that acronym, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Right, the classic triggers.
But it felt like they went deeper. They talked about spending as a form of emotional regulation.
Or maybe emotional dysregulation. I mean,
Yeah?
think about retail therapy. We say it as a joke, but it is a very real psychological event.
How does that actually work?
Well, when you're stressed, your cortisol levels are high. The act of spending, making a choice, acquiring something, can give you a temporary hit that lowers that stress.
But there was one specific emotional driver in the text that really stood out to me. And it wasn't just stress, it was the need for control.
Oh, that's a huge one.
The idea that when life feels totally out of control, your job is insane, the news is overwhelming, you feel this loss of agency, you can't fix the world.
You can't fix your boss.
But you can buy a label maker.
The label maker is the perfect example. It's the symbol of order.
It is. I have totally done this. I felt overwhelmed by some huge project, and instead of working on it, I go on Amazon and buy organizational tools. The source called it proxy control.
That's such a great term for it. You solve a tiny, manageable problem because the macro problem feels too big. A transaction is a perfect little story. I want this, I pay for it, I get it. It's a moment of pure cause and effect in a world that, rarely feels that simple.
It creates this false sense of stability. For 5 minutes, you are the master of your universe.
And that's why it's so compelling. You're not buying the product, you're buying the feeling of being in charge.
And then there's just plain old boredom, which I think we underestimate. The reading mentioned the dopamine menu concept. That we all have this menu of things we can do to get a little stimulation. And for many of us, shopping has just become the easiest appetizer to order.
Because it's frictionless. Reading a book takes effort. Learning to play guitar takes effort. Scrolling and clicking. It's passive. It's high reward, low effort stimulation that fills that void instantly.
Okay, so we've got the biological engine with dopamine. We've got the emotional triggers like stress and control.
But we aren't doing this in a vacuum.
No, we're doing it in an environment that is engineered from the ground up to weaponize those two things against us.
Now we have to talk about the marketing machine.
And not just ads exist. The sources were really specific about how sophisticated this has all become. It's not about product features anymore. It's about identity.
This is the ideal self gap. Marketers know you have your actual self, who you are today, maybe a little tired, a little insecure, and then you have your ideal self.
The person you want to be.
The person you want to be. The fit, adventurous, organized, successful you.
And the product is always positioned as the bridge between the two.
Exactly. They aren't selling a jacket. They are selling the lifestyle of the person who wears that jacket. You buy the fleece, you're buying into the identity of the eco-conscious explorer, even if you only wear it to the supermarket.
That reminds me of the Diderot effect that came up in the reading, the philosopher Denis Diderot.
Yeah, the story of his dressing gown.
Right. He gets this beautiful, fancy scarlet dressing gown, and all of a sudden he looks around his office and everything else, his chair, his rug, it all looks shabby in comparison.
So he has to upgrade everything.
He replaces the rug, then the chair, then the desk. The introduction of one new identity item created this cascade of consumption to make everything else match.
And marketers trigger that constantly. You get the new phone, now your old headphones feel inadequate. You buy the nice sofa, now the paint on the walls looks dingy.
And social media has just poured jet fuel on that entire fire.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because your ideal self is no longer just this internal idea. It's being curated and displayed by everyone else's highlight reels 24/7.
The sources called it the shift from keeping up with the Joneses to keeping up with the Kardashians.
Or even just keep up with the algorithm. When it's just the Joneses next door, the comparison group was small.
Limited.
Now you're comparing your daily life to the top 1% of the planet's most beautifully curated experiences. Your brain's social comparison circuit just lights up like a Christmas tree.
And that triggers this primal fear of falling behind, of being irrelevant.
Which is a deep evolutionary fear. For our ancestors, being cast out of the tribe meant death. So when we spend to fit in, we're actually soothing a very old anxiety about being excluded.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second, because this can all start to feel pretty bleak.
It can.
We're up against our own brain chemistry, our deepest insecurities, and a multi-trillion-dollar industry that knows exactly which buttons to push. It feels like a rigged game.
It is a rigged game, but, and then this is the big pivot, you don't have to play. Which brings us back to the whole mission here.
Awareness over guilt.
Exactly. The goal is not to go live in a cave and weave your own sandals.
Right. The sources are very clear on this. There's nothing inherently wrong with buying things you enjoy.
Nothing at all. The problem isn't consumption. It's mindless consumption. It's the gap between what you think you're doing, making a rational choice, and what you're actually doing.
Which is usually soothing an emotion.
Right.
This gets us to that distinction between wants and needs, and I think this is a tricky area because needs can be a very slippery word.
It is. Strictly speaking, needs are food, water, shelter, basic clothing. Almost everything else is a want. But we have been taught to demonize wants. We act like wanting something is frivolous or bad.
So what do? We do these mental gymnastics to reclassify our wants as needs.
Precisely. You don't say, I want the new iPhone because it looks cool. You say, I need the new iPhone because my current battery drains 10% faster, and that's critical for my work.
We invent a rationalization to get past our own internal guilt filter.
But what the authors argue is that the healthiest thing to do is just admit it's a want. To own it. To say, I am buying this $6 latte, not because I need caffeine, but because I want the experience of being in this coffee shop right now.
That strips away the self-deception. And weirdly, when you do that, you feel more in control, not less.
Because you're making a conscious choice, not fulfilling some imaginary mandate. And once you own it as a choice, you can actually ask if it's worth it. Do I want this enough to trade an hour of my work for it?
So, okay, how do we put this into practice? In the moment, when the dopamine is firing and there's a countdown clock on the website, it's really hard to be that philosophical.
It is incredibly hard, which is why you need a system. You have to intentionally introduce friction. The sources call this the power of the pause.
Friction is the enemy of impulse.
It is. I mean, Amazon's one-click buy, Apple Pay, they spend billions to remove every possible point of friction. They want a direct line from your dopamine center to your bank account.
Yeah.
Your job is to manually add that friction back in.
And the main tactic is a mandatory waiting period.
Yes.
Yeah.
24 to 48 hours is ideal. See something you want? Fine. Put it in the cart. But you make a hard rule. You cannot click buy until tomorrow.
What's happening in the brain during that delay?
The neurochemicals are metabolizing that intense dopamine spike we talked about. It has a half-life. It's powerful, but it's short. If you just step away, the chemical urge literally fades. You wake up the next morning with cool brain, not a hot one.
I've done this, and it's actually shocking how often I completely forget I even put something in the cart.
And that's the proof right there. If you forgot about it, it was never about the item. It was about the feeling in that moment.
So during that pause, the text says to ask yourself 3 specific questions, and they aren't, can I afford this?
No, that's a math question. These are psychological questions.
Question 1 is, why do I want this right now?
The key words are right now. It forces you to look at the immediate trigger. Did I just see an ad? Did I have a bad day? Am I bored?
Okay. Question 2, how am I feeling at this moment?
This is the AGLT check. If the answer is I'm feeling lonely or I'm feeling stressed, then you know the purchase is probably a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And a new pair of shoes is a terrible cure for loneliness.
Well, that's the hard truth. Okay, and the third question, which I think is maybe the most powerful, will this matter to me in a month?
This one is huge. It breaks the tunnel vision of urgency. Our brains are terrible at thinking about our future selves. We always prioritize present me. This question forces you to imagine future you.
It's about seeing past the unboxing. Visualize the item after the novelty has worn off. Is it still adding value, or is it just clutter?
And if you do all that, you wait 24 hours, you ask the questions, and you still genuinely want the item.
Then buy it and enjoy it guilt-free.
Exactly. This isn't about deprivation. It's just about intentionality.
So the end goal really is to stop using spending as a solution for emotional problems.
Money is a tool. It's a really bad therapist.
Yeah.
When we ask a material object to do a spiritual or emotional job, it can't hold that weight. It's not designed for it.
That brings me to the closing thought from the sources, which I found really profound. It suggests that what we're actually chasing isn't the stuff itself.
No. Never. We're chasing the feeling we think the stuff will give us. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we belong. We want excitement. We want to feel competent.
We've just been conditioned to believe those feelings can be bought.
But safety comes from internal stability, not a better home security system. Belonging comes from connection with people, not from wearing the right brand.
And once you really get that, deep down, the urge to shop doesn't vanish, but it loses its power over you.
You can walk into a store, see something beautiful, appreciate it for what it is, and then just leave it there. You don't need to possess it to be whole.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought from this deep dive. It's something to consider the next time you find yourself scrolling. We spend so much money building an identity with our clothes, our gadgets, our home decor.
Mm-hmm.
But if you stripped away all the spending you do for stress relief, if you took away the things you buy out of boredom, and if you removed everything you bought just to prove something to other people, how much of your identity would be left on the shelf?
And, more importantly, who would you be underneath it all?
That is the real deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Until next time. Okay, I want you to picture a specific moment. It's a 3 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Uh-huh.
You've been staring at a screen for, what, 6 hours? Your coffee has long since worn off.
And you're left with that jittery, sort of acidic feeling in your stomach.
Exactly. You look at your to-do list, and somehow, and this is the part that drives me crazy, it is actually longer than it was at 9 a.m.
Then comes that physical sensation, right? That tightening in the chest.
Yes, it's that low-level hum of panic, the voice in your head just whispering, you are not doing enough, you're behind, you are failing.
And that's pretty much the universal soundtrack of modern work. We're all, culturally conditioned to think the solution is just to speed up.
Do more, do it faster, optimize every single second.
Yeah, it's a race where the finish line keeps moving.
And the worst part, and this is what we're really digging into today, is that we've attached our self-worth to that race. If I'm not crushing it, am I even, worthy?
That is the exact existential crisis our source material is tackling. We're looking at a guide called How to Be Productive Without Burning Out.
Okay.
But I want to be clear right up front. This is not a list of, life hacks. We are not going to tell you to wake up at 4 a.m.
Oh, thank goodness, because if I hear one more guru tell me that sleep is for the weak, I think I might just scream.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to completely dismantle that old high-pressure idea of productivity.
And replace it with something based on
Yeah.
what? Balance. Sustainability.
Sustainability is the key word. The source makes this really provocative claim right at the beginning. Productivity is not about emptying the tank every single day.
I love that.
True productivity, the kind that lasts for years, not just a few weeks, is about working in a way that actually supports your life instead of draining it.
So it challenges that whole idea that burnout is just the price you pay for being successful.
Precisely. That idea that if you aren't suffering, you aren't working hard enough.
Okay, so we have a lot to unpack. We're going to look at the anatomy of burnout, which is much sneakier than just being tired.
And then we'll get into the science of managing your energy, not just your time.
And my favorite part? The idea that doing less is actually the path to doing better, which I have to admit sounds like a paradox.
It does, but the logic really holds up. But before we get to the solutions, we have to properly diagnose the problem. We need to talk about the beast itself, burnout.
Right. And the source makes a very sharp distinction between stress and burnout. They are not the same thing.
I think most people use them interchangeably, but they're fundamentally different.
So what's the technical difference?
Think of it this way. Stress is a problem of too much. Too many pressures, too many demands. You feel overwhelmed.
But you can still imagine that if you just got things under control, you'd feel better. You're still sort of in the fight.
Exactly. You're engaged. Burnout is different. It's a problem of not enough. Not enough motivation, not enough connection, not enough meaning.
It's a state of emptiness.
Yes. The text defines it as what happens when effort goes on for a long, long time without any meaning or rest.
That hits hard. It's the futility of it. Feeling like a hamster on a wheel, you're moving, but you're going nowhere.
And the source really emphasizes this does not happen overnight. This is so crucial for you to understand.
You don't just wake up one day and have burnout.
No, it's a slow creep. The source lays out these stages, and I think it's worth going through them because they look deceptively normal at first.
I found this part terrifyingly relatable. Let's start with stage one.
Stage one is the compulsion to prove. This one is tricky because it actually looks like you're a high performer.
You feel tired, sure, but you're also super motivated. You're running on adrenaline.
You're taking on extra projects. You're trying to prove your worth.
And you're telling yourself, I just need to power through this month, and then things will calm down. But the month never ends.
Correct. And that leads to stage two, frustration and cynicism. The adrenaline starts to fade, and now you're just irritated.
You start feeling detached from your work, maybe snapping at people.
I love your name for it, the per my last email phase.
Yeah, you're just angry that tasks even exist.
And that cynicism, it's a defense mechanism. Your brain is trying to distance itself from the pain. If you don't catch it there, you hit stage three, collapse.
The danger zone.
This is where the lights go out. Even a small task, like sending an email, feels physically heavy, like climbing a mountain.
And the motivation is just gone. You look at the screen and you just do not care.
That's the key symptom. And here is where the source dropped a massive truth bomb for me.
About why this happens, because we usually think, oh, I burned out because I'm weak. I couldn't handle it.
The weakness myth. We internalize it as a personal failure.
But the text says something completely different. It says, burnout is not a sign of weakness. It is often a sign that someone has been trying too hard for too long.
It's just such a profound reframing. It means the people most likely to burn out are often the most dedicated and conscientious ones.
Wow. So it's not that you're weak. It's that you've been strong for way too long without any support.
It changes the whole diagnosis. It's not the driver's fault the car broke down. It's that you can't redline an engine indefinitely.
Right. It's just basic physics. If the engine overheats, it's not because the engine is lazy.
It's because the system wasn't maintained.
So the solution isn't to just slam your foot on the gas pedal harder. The source says we need a whole paradigm shift away from time management.
And toward energy management. This is the real pivot point of the whole guide.
Because traditional productivity is obsessed with the clock, right?
Yeah.
8 hours, fill them up.
It treats us like machines. But the text argues productivity is biological. All hours are not created equal.
I love that phrase. It's so true.
It is. We act like our energy at 9 a.m. is the same as 3 p.m. Biologically, that's just impossible. We're governed by something called ultradian rhythms.
Okay, unpack that for us. Ultradian rhythms.
So most people have heard of circadian rhythms, the 24-hour sleep-wake cycle.
Right.
Ultradian rhythms are shorter cycles that happen during the day. Research suggests our brains can only really focus intensely for about 90 to 120 minutes.
And after that?
After that, they need a break, a reset.
So that slump I feel after I've been working hard for a couple hours, that's not me being lazy.
No, that is your biology screaming for a recovery period. Your brain has literally run low on the fuel it needs for deep focus.
Okay, so practically what do we do with that? We can't just tell our boss, sorry, my ultradian rhythm is off right now.
Oh, well, you could try. But the strategy is to map your work to your energy. You have to identify your biological prime time.
For most people, that's the morning, but not for everyone.
And you protect that time. You reserve those high energy peaks for your most important work, the deep, creative, strategic stuff.
And then, when that inevitable dip hits in the afternoon,
you don't have to stop working. You just switch the type of work. You use that low energy time for what the source calls shallow work.
Answering routine emails, filing stuff, scheduling meetings, things that don't need a ton of brain power.
You're matching the task to the fuel in the tank.
Yeah.
If you try to do heavy lifting when you're in a slump, you just get exhausted and frustrated.
Which brings us to the part of the guide that I think is the hardest for people to accept.
The idea of doing less.
In a culture that just screams hustle 24/7, this feels, I don't know, almost illegal.
It feels completely counterintuitive, but the source grounds this in the science of cognitive load.
It says a long to-do list is actually a productivity killer. Why is that?
Well, it's more than just being intimidating. When your brain sees a list with 50 items on it, it registers a threat. It creates a stress response.
And stress makes it harder to focus.
It biologically inhibits the part of your brain you need for focus. But there's also something called the Zeigarnik effect.
The Zeigarnik effect. Sounds like a Bond villain.
It's a psychological thing where your brain remembers unfinished tasks much better than finished ones.
All those unfinished things on my list are just hanging out in the back of my mind.
Exactly. They create open loops that are constantly draining your mental battery in the background. You're sabotaging your own focus.
Plus, every time you jump between tasks, there's a cost, right?
A huge one. They call it switching cost. It takes, on average, something like 23 minutes to get back into deep focus after you've been interrupted.
That's horrifying. So multitasking is basically a lie.
It's a biological impossibility. You're just switching context really fast and paying a mental tax every single time you do it.
So the recommendation is radical. Quality over quantity.
Choose just a few important tasks, maybe 3, and focus on finishing them.
And think about the psychological boost of that. Finishing one big thing feels so much better than starting 10 little things and finishing none of them.
You get that dopamine hit, you close the loop, you get energy back.
But to get the energy to finish those big things, we have to talk about the R word, rest.
The thing we are all so bad at.
This section really called me out. It confronts this belief that rest is a reward, that you only get to rest after everything is done.
But the source has this brilliant, if slightly depressing reality check for that.
What's that?
In real life, everything is never done.
It's so true. The laundry is never done. The emails never stop. If you wait for everything to be finished, you'll rest when you're dead.
Which is why the guide reframes rest completely. It's not a luxury, it's a biological maintenance requirement.
It's like charging your phone. You don't wait till it's at 0% to charge it. You charge it so it works.
Yes, but here's where it gets really interesting. The source distinguishes between numbing and resting.
Ooh, this is a big one. I definitely confuse the two. Is scrolling Instagram for an hour rest?
According to the source, no, that's numbing. It gives you a little dopamine hit, but it's high sensory input. Your brain is still processing a ton of data.
So what's true rest?
True rest engages what's called the default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN, okay.
It's the brain network that kicks in when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're daydreaming or walking in nature or just staring out a window.
And that's important.
It's crucial. That's when your brain consolidates memories, makes new connections. It's where creativity comes from.
So when I'm just staring at a wall doing nothing, my brain is actually doing some of its most important work.
Exactly. Rest isn't the absence of activity. It is a different kind of activity.
I love that. Okay, so we're doing less, we're resting better, but we still have jobs. The source talks about creating gentle routines.
Structure without pressure. That's the key phrase.
Because when I hear routine, I think of those intense YouTube videos. 4 a.m., ice bath, 4.15, journal.
And if you miss one step, your whole day feels ruined. That's a brittle routine. A gentle routine is like a guardrail, not a cage.
So what does that look like in practice?
It's mostly about bookending your day. First, start the day slowly. Don't check your email the second you open your eyes.
You guilty.
That just spikes your cortisol and puts your brain in reactive mode instantly. Second, take those regular breaks we talked about. And third, and this is so important now, have a clear shutdown ritual.
Ah, the end time. It's so hard when your office is your kitchen table. The work just bleeds into everything.
Which is why the ritual is so important, a physical action. Close the laptop, tidy your desk, go for a walk. Something that tells your brain, work mode is off now.
That helps with the psychological detachment.
It does. But speaking of detachment, we have to talk about the hardest skill in the whole guide.
The art of saying no.
The necessity of refusal.
It is so socially painful. It feels like you're letting people down. It feels dangerous.
It feels dangerous because we're wired to avoid social rejection. But the source grounds this in the simple economics of energy. It's a zero-sum game.
You can't just create more energy out of thin air.
Exactly. So every yes has a cost. Saying yes to something trivial means you are, by definition, saying no to something essential.
If I say yes to a meeting I don't need to be in, I'm saying no to my deep work or my rest.
Precisely. So you're reframing it. It's not about being unkind or lazy. It's about understanding your limits so you can protect your ability to show up fully when it really matters.
That actually helps with the guilt. You're not saying no because you don't care. You're saying no because you care about doing a good job on the things that count.
And people respect that clarity more than we think they will.
Okay, let's go a little deeper for a minute.
Yeah.
The final section of the source gets into something almost philosophical. It's about why we get into this mess in the first place. It's about identity.
This is the absolute core of it. You can fix your schedule, you can take all the breaks, but if you don't address this, you'll just burn out again.
And the main point is,
productivity is a tool, not an identity.
I feel that. I think a lot of us, if we're honest, feel like we are only as valuable as what we produce. I was busy today, therefore I am good.
It's called enmeshment in psychology. Your self-worth gets all tangled up with your output, and the source just says, no. You are not valuable because of what you produce.
You are valuable just because you exist. A human being, not a human doing.
It sounds a little like a greeting card, but when you really try to live by it, it's terrifying.
Because if you strip away the job title and the to-do list, you're just left with you. And for a lot of high achievers, that silence is the scariest thing in the world.
It's deeply uncomfortable, but the text contrasts how these two mindsets feel in your body. Toxic productivity feels heavy, it feels frantic, and it's based in fear.
And the alternative, sustainable productivity.
The source describes it as feeling calm, steady, quiet, and kind.
Quiet and kind. I have never once associated the word kind with productivity. Productivity is supposed to be aggressive. Crush it. Kill it.
It's a radical shift. It suggests a healthy approach has to have space for grace, for the fact that you're a biological organism that has bad days and needs rest.
So if we put it all back together, the synthesis here, the big picture.
Is that we have to move from a mechanical view of ourselves to a biological one. We have to respect the organism.
Which means managing energy, not time.
It means needing rest as fuel, not as a reward. It means gentle routines and setting boundaries. And it means we have to stop measuring our days by how many boxes we checked.
Yes. The shift is internal. The guide suggests changing the question you ask yourself every morning instead of, how can I do more?
You ask, how can I work in a way that feels sustainable?
That's the takeaway right there. Sustainability. Because if you burn out, you're not productive at all. A broken engine goes nowhere.
The goal is to stay in the race for the long haul, not sprint until you collapse at mile 2.
So as you, our listener, go about your day-to-day, whether you're at work or washing dishes or just staring at that to-do list, try to summon that feeling of quiet and steady.
And check your energy, not just the clock. Remember the lesson on identity.
Right, and here's a thought to leave you with, something to chew on that really comes from that identity section. If you stripped away everything you produce today, every email, every task, if you achieve 0 results,
Would you still feel valuable?
the source suggests the answer is yes. But actually believing that, living that truth, that's the ultimate challenge.
Something to explore. Thanks for diving in with us. Okay, picture the scene. It's a Tuesday night, or maybe it's early Sunday morning. You've finally carved out that holy grail of modern life, free time.
Right.
You have a clear goal. Maybe you need to finish a report, study for certification, or honestly, maybe you just want to read that novel that's been gathering dust.
You have the coffee, you have the comfy chair, the intention is there.
Exactly. You sit down, you open the book or the laptop, and then tick, tick, tick. 30 seconds later, what is actually happening?
Oh, I know this one. You are scrolling through a social media feed, or you're suddenly just paralyzed by the thought of an email you might have forgotten to send 3 days ago.
Yes.
Or, my personal favorite, you find yourself deeply, deeply invested in researching the weather patterns for a vacation you haven't even booked yet.
It's so immediate. It's like trying to hold on to a wet bar of soap. The mind just slips. And the feeling that follows isn't usually, oh, well, better luck next time.
No, it's frustration. It is this heavy, sinking feeling that focusing has become technically harder than it's ever been.
It feels like a universal problem right now. And because it's so hard, we build this whole story around it, don't we?
We do. We tell ourselves it's a character flaw, that we lack discipline. We need to buckle down or grit our teeth.
Right, the brute force method. If I just, hate myself enough, I'll eventually do the work.
Which, spoiler alert, rarely works. But today, we are doing a deep dive into some fascinating research, all anchored by an article called How to Stay Focused in a World Full of Distractions.
Okay.
And our mission here is really to dismantle that exact myth. The big takeaway from all our research isn't that you need more discipline, it's that you need to stop fighting your own biology.
I'm listening. Because if the answer isn't just try harder, I am very, very interested.
Well, the answer is significantly more nuanced.
Yeah?
It's about understanding the mechanics of attention, like cognitive load and attentional residue. And it's about managing your environment to lower that load.
Okay.
And maybe most surprisingly, it's about treating your brain with kindness rather than with force.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. Kindness. I'm going to be honest, that sounds a little soft.
Okay.
If I have a deadline in 2 hours and I'm procrastinating, being kind to my brain feels like a great way to get fired. How does kindness actually get the report written?
It sounds so counterintuitive, I know. But the research suggests that, well, that self-flagellation, it actually takes up mental bandwidth. It consumes the very energy you need for the task.
Yeah.
The source makes it really clear. Focus isn't a personality trait you lack. It's a biological system that you can actually optimize.
So let's get into the machinery of this, because I think most people, myself included, assume the problem is obvious. It's the glowing rectangle in my pocket. It's the phone.
That is certainly the external trigger. I mean, the source acknowledges that today's world is an ecosystem of noise notifications, messages, algorithm video feeds, all of it.
Right.
But here is where it gets really interesting and where we need to look at the brain's default mode network. The source makes this critical distinction between external noise and internal noise.
Internal noise, you mean like my own brain's sabotaging me?
Essentially, we tend to think distraction comes from the outside. But studies show that, on average, we shift our attention about 4 times per minute, often without any external prompt at all.
4 times a minute. That's terrifying.
It's the internal noise. We're talking about worries, random memories, future planning, that awkward thing you said 5 years ago.
Oh, yes.
This is often linked to that default mode network in the brain, which activates when we aren't focused on a specific task. It's basically the daydreaming circuit.
So I can be in a soundproof bunker, phone locked in a safe, and my default mode network is still going to be throwing random thoughts at me.
Precisely. And the source points out that technology just aggravates this. It's not just that the apps catch our attention, it's that our interaction with them has rewired our baseline for stimulation.
The dopamine loop, the slot machine effect.
Exactly. And over time, the brain just habituates to that high level of input. So when you finally do turn everything off, silence doesn't feel peaceful. Silence feels threatening. It feels like withdrawal.
Silence can feel uncomfortable. That really hits home for me. It explains why I reach for my phone when I'm just standing in an elevator for 10 seconds.
You're not even checking anything specific, right?
No, I'm just avoiding the silence.
You're avoiding the drop in stimulation. And the source puts it really well. This doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your brain is responding naturally to the environment it lives in. Your brain is trying to protect you from boredom.
I think that validation is so important because it's easy to spiral into thinking I'm broken or I used to be able to read for 3 hours. What happened to my brain?
You are not broken. You're just adapted to a high stimulation world. And once you realize that internal noise is a biological reflex, you can stop blaming your character and start adjusting your strategy.
Speaking of character, that brings us to another huge myth the source tackles, the idea of the focused personality. I hear this constantly. Oh, I'm just not the focused type. I've said it myself. I'm a creative, scattered brain. I thrive in chaos. Is that even a real thing?
It's a very common excuse. And while, sure, personality traits vary, the source frames focus completely differently. It argues that focus is a skill. It's a neurocognitive capacity, not some fixed personality trait.
So if it's a skill, that implies it can be trained, like learning a language.
Or even more physically, like a muscle.
Right.
The source uses the muscle analogy, and I want to go a little deeper into that. If you put your arm in a cast for 6 weeks, what happens?
Well, the muscle shrinks. It atrophies.
Right. And in our modern environment, our deep focus muscle is essentially in a cast. We rarely use it because we're constantly grazing on shallow information.
Yeah.
So when you try to use it, it feels weak. It feels painful.
So when I sit down to work and I feel that physical resistance that I can't do this feeling, that's just the atrophy talking.
That is the muscle fatigue. A physical muscle gets stronger when you use it gently and regularly. But what happens if you try to, I don't know, bench press 300 pounds on your first day back at the gym?
You tear something, you get injured. Badly.
And attention works the same way. The source says attention gets tired when it's overused or constantly interrupted. If you're forcing it all day, of course it's going to fail.
Right.
The goal, according to our material, isn't perfect robot-like focus. The goal is gentle, repeatable attention.
Gentle, repeatable attention. That feels so much more sustainable than the, hustle culture version of focus.
Sustainability is everything. If you view focus as a muscle, you realize you have to treat it with care. You don't scream at a bicep to get bigger. You train it.
Okay, let's talk about that training. Because if willpower is a finite resource, which I definitely feel it is, how do we bypass the need for it?
We have to look at something called cognitive load theory. The source argues that one of the most effective ways to improve focus is to change your environment to reduce the load on your working memory.
This is the environment over willpower argument.
Yes. If you have to rely on willpower to ignore your phone, you're burning energy. You're engaging in what's called inhibitory control. Your brain is actively spending glucose to not look at the phone.
So just having the phone on the desk, even if it's silent and face down,
is draining your battery. Studies cited in similar research back this up. The mere presence of your smartphone reduces your available cognitive capacity.
Wow.
The source suggests visual and auditory hygiene.
Hygiene. That sounds like I need to break out the disinfectant.
It's mental hygiene. It lists specific changes. First, keeping the phone strictly out of reach, not just face down, but physically in another room or a drawer out of your visual field.
That's a big one. What's the second point?
Reducing visual clutter. And this isn't just about being tidy for the sake of it.
Yeah, explain that. Because I'm that person with the messy desk who says I know where everything is. Why does a stack of papers matter if I'm looking at my screen?
Because of how your visual cortex works. Your brain doesn't just process what you're focusing on. It is constantly monitoring your peripheral vision for threats or changes. That stack of papers, the coffee cup, the sticky notes.
They're all competing for attention.
They're competing for neural representation. Your brain is practically whispering, there's a paper, there's a cup, there's a wire.
Constantly.
Yes.
My
It
God.
creates a baseline of low-level anxiety, and it consumes processing power. When you reduce that visual clutter, you lower the cognitive load. You're freeing up RAM for the actual task.
That makes perfect sense. It's like closing the 50 tabs I have open in my browser so the computer stops lagging.
That is the perfect metaphor. And the third point is just using soft background sounds, or silence, to do the same for your auditory processing. The whole idea is to remove the friction so that focus becomes the path of least resistance.
Okay, so we've cleaned the desk, we've hidden the phone, we've lowered the cognitive load, but now we have to actually do the work. And this is where I feel like modern work culture just fights us because we are obsessed with multitasking.
Oh wait, we wear like a badge of honor.
I do. I feel like a wizard when I'm juggling things. I'm replying to a Slack message while listening to a Zoom call and editing a document. It feels incredibly productive.
It feels productive. And that is the trap. The source is very, very firm on this. Multitasking is a biological impossibility for high-level tasks.
But I'm doing it. I mean, I am doing 3 things at once.
You're task switching.
Yeah.
You're rapidly toggling between tasks. And this introduces a concept I really want to dig into called attentional residue.
Attentional residue, that sounds gross, like mental slime.
It kind of is. It's a term from a business professor, Sophie Leroy. Basically, when you switch from task A, say the email, to task B, the document, your attention doesn't switch instantly and cleanly.
Okay.
A residue of your attention remains stuck thinking about the email.
So part of my brain is still drafting that reply while I'm trying to write the report.
Exactly. You are effectively working with a dimmer brain. You have fewer cognitive resources available for the new task, and the more you switch, the more that residue builds up.
And I guess that explains why at the end of a day where I felt like a multitasking god, I'm actually just completely drained and the quality of my work is mediocre.
You spent all your energy on the switching cost, the metabolic cost of recalibrating your brain over and over again. You burned the fuel, but you didn't really go anywhere.
So what's the alternative? Single tasking sounds painfully slow.
It feels slow because you aren't getting those rapid-fire dopamine hits from switching all the time. But the source advocates for doing one thing at a time. Even small moments of it prevent that residue buildup.
But let's be real, just do one thing is hard when I have a to-do list a mile long.
It is, which is why the source redefines the duration of focus. This part really stood out to me. We tend to think deep work means locking ourselves away for 4 hours like a monk.
Right. If I can't focus for 4 hours, I shouldn't even bother starting.
But the source says focus doesn't need to be long. Even 10 or 15 minutes of unfragmented, single-task attention is meaningful.
10 minutes. I'm going to push back a little here. 10 minutes feels like nothing. Can you actually get anything done in 10 minutes?
It's not about finishing the project in 10 minutes. It's about overcoming the threshold of resistance. If you tell your brain, we need to focus for 4 hours, the amygdala, your fear center, it just lights up.
It's too big of a mountain to climb.
It perceives a threat. It says, no way, that's too much pain. But if you say, I'm just going to focus for 15 minutes, that's manageable. It lowers the stakes, and usually once you start, you keep going.
It's the light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. Knowing a break is coming helps the mind relax and stay present. It reduces the pressure. But we have to talk about what that break looks like, because this leads to the most critical relationship in the whole text, the connection between focus and rest.
I feel like we usually treat rest as a reward. Like, if I suffer enough through this work, then I am allowed to stop.
And the source flips that completely on its head. It argues that rest helps focus more than effort does. The quote that jumped out at me was, trying harder is not always the answer.
Which goes against everything we're taught in school or sports. Push through it.
But look at the biology. If the brain is depleted of glucose, if your neurons are fatigued, effort just creates frustration. You can't force a tired muscle to lift a heavy weight.
Right.
The source says sleep, quiet moments, gentle activities. These are prerequisites for focus, not rewards for it.
So rest isn't the prize. Rest is the fuel.
A rested mind finds focus naturally. A tired mind breeds distraction because it just lacks the inhibition control to stop the wandering.
I love that reframing, but I want to circle back to something you mentioned at the very beginning, kindness. We've covered the biology, the environment, the residue, but you said kindness was a functional part of this system.
This is the gentle mindset, because even if you rest and you clean your desk and you hide your phone, your mind will wander. The default mode network will kick in.
It's inevitable.
The question is, How do you react when it happens?
Usually, I get angry. I think, come on, stop wasting time. You're being lazy.
That reaction, that judgment, is a secondary distraction. Now you have the original distraction plus a layer of negative emotion. You are effectively doubling your cognitive load.
So by getting mad at myself for getting distracted, I'm actually making it harder to get back to work.
You're digging the hole deeper. The source suggests a no-judgment rule. When you notice you've wandered, you just gently bring the mind back.
That sounds a lot like meditation advice.
It is, essentially, but applied to work. The source suggests we should reframe the return. Instead of seeing the distraction as a failure, you view the act of returning to the task as a repetition. That is the moment the muscle gets stronger.
Oh, I like that. The win isn't never getting distracted. The win is the moment you return.
Exactly. Every time you catch yourself wandering and gently, without anger, bring your attention back to the report, you've just done a rep. That is how you build the skill.
So kindness isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy. It's about efficiency. It's about not wasting energy on self-criticism so you can use that energy for the task itself.
That is the core argument. The source actually calls choosing focus an act of kindness toward yourself.
Can we unpack that? Because usually focus feels like a chore, not a gift.
Well, think about the alternative state. Scattered attention, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, rushing. That constant low-level panic of multitasking, that is a very stressful way to live, right?
It is. It's exhausting.
When you create a space for focus, calm, steady monotasking, you are creating a sanctuary for your brain. You aren't trying to control your mind with an iron fist. You're caring for it by giving it one single thing to do.
That's profound. It changes focus from a disciplinary measure into a form of self-care.
It transforms the entire experience. The text says focus doesn't need to be intense. It can be soft, steady, and calm.
Soft, steady, and calm. That is a very different vibe from the crush-it productivity advice we usually get.
And honestly, in an economy that thrives on stealing your attention, simply slowing down is a radical act.
So let's bring this all down to earth for everyone listening. We've covered a lot of ground, from the default mode network to attentional residue. What's the immediate application?
It starts with the environment. I mean, respect your cognitive load. Change your space so you don't have to fight it. Hide the phone, clear the visual clutter, don't make your brain process junk.
And stop the multitasking. It's a lie. It's just slime building up in your brain. Do one thing, even if it's just for 10 minutes.
And embrace those short bursts. Lower the threshold. 10 minutes of real focus is so much better than an hour of scattered, frustrated effort.
And finally, the mindset. Be kind. When your mind wanders, and it will just gently bring it back, that return is the victory.
It's about reclaiming your own attention,
Right.
not by force, but by creating the right conditions for it to thrive.
I want to leave everyone with a thought to mull over today. We talked about how focus is an act of kindness, but I want to flip that.
Yeah.
If attention is a muscle, we are currently living in a gym that's designed to make that muscle atrophy. Every app, every notification, every breaking news banner is designed to monetize your distraction.
That is the attention economy.
So the question is, when you let the noise win, who are you actually serving? Are you serving yourself, or are you serving the algorithm?
That's a powerful question.
Maybe the most radical, rebellious thing you can do today isn't to protest or shout. Maybe it's just to close the tabs, put the phone in a drawer, and give yourself permission to do one single thing for just 10 minutes.
Reclaim your time.
Exactly. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time. Okay, let's start today with a bit of a confession. I want you to think about the last time you ran into a friend, or maybe a colleague you haven't seen in a while. You ask them that standard question, how are you? And they sigh, look you right in the eye and say, I am just so busy.
It's the new I'm fine, isn't it? It's almost the default greeting now.
It really is.
Yeah.
But here's the darker question I want to ask. When you say it, when you tell people how swamped you are, be honest. Does a small part of you feel, I don't know, good about it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's some weird badge of honor?
It validates us. We live in this culture that has completely convinced us that success is a very specific equation.
Right.
More hours, plus more tasks, plus more effort equals better results. And the implication is always that if you aren't totally exhausted, you're obviously not trying hard enough.
That is the whole hustle culture trap right there. This idea that burnout is just, the price you pay. But today, we are looking at a stack of research that suggests that equation isn't just a little bit off. It might be completely backwards.
Right.
We're diving into a text titled, Why Doing Less Often Leads to Better Results. And I have to say, reading this felt like a relief, but it also felt a little dangerous.
Dangerous how? That's an interesting word for it.
Well, it just challenges the way most of us operate. It suggests that doing too much is actually the cause of our failure, not the solution. It made you look back and wonder if all that grinding was just a waste of time.
And that is the core premise. It's a really tough pill to swallow. The source argues that overloading your day doesn't just make you tired.
Which is obvious.
Yeah, that part we know. It says it leads to actual confusion, stress, and, objectively poor outcomes. The argument is that busyness literally makes you worse at your job.
So just to be clear from the start, this isn't a deep dive about, self-care in the sense of taking a spa day because you deserve it.
No, not at all. This is about performance strategy.
A strategic pivot.
Precisely. The mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the mechanics, the neuroscience and psychology of it, of why our brains just plain function better with less input. We want to see how slowing down isn't about laziness, it's about being more effective.
Okay, I want to get into the nuts and bolts
Okay.
because do less sounds great, but in the real world, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
The source starts by identifying this villain in our daily lives. It calls it mental noise.
Mental noise is such a fantastic term for this. I mean, think about a typical day for you.
Yeah.
Your schedule is just stuff. You have tasks, you have messages pinging every few minutes, family stuff, the news. The source describes your mind in that state as just noisy.
It feels like static or like a swarm of bees in your head.
It's actually worse than static because static is consistent. It's kinetic. Your thoughts are literally jumping from one thing to another without ever really landing on anything.
Right.
So in that state, your brain never actually settles on one problem. It just skims the surface of like 20 different things.
It's like having 50 browser tabs open in your brain. You get that feeling where the computer fan starts whirring like a jet engine, and there's music playing from some tab you can't even find.
That's the perfect analogy. And just think about the performance of that computer. It slows down, it crashes. The source points out the human version of that. It says even simple decisions can feel heavy. When you have that much noise, you can work a 12-hour day and your satisfaction is just rock bottom. You feel like you're running through mud.
I know that feeling so well. And my reaction usually is to just push harder.
Wow.
I think, okay, I just need to grind through this. I tell myself I need to answer more emails to clear the deck so I can finally think. But the text says that's the wrong move.
It is the worst move you can make. It makes this really crucial distinction. It says the problem isn't a lack of effort. You're trying hard enough.
Right.
The problem is too much input. You are trying to pour a gallon of water into a pint glass. Pushing harder just makes a bigger mess.
That's a huge perspective shift.
Yeah.
It's not a discipline failure. It's an input failure.
Exactly.
Right.
And the only way to fix an input failure is to, well, restrict the input. The source is very blunt about this. Reducing the number of tasks is the only way to reduce mental pressure. You can't outwork the noise. You have to silence it by taking things away.
Okay, so let's say we do that. We close some of the tabs. What happens then? Because the text moves into what I'm thinking of as the physics of focus. It talks about attention, almost like it's a physical thing that takes up space.
It does, and this is where the science gets really cool. The one line that stood out to me was, focus is not something we can force. It appears when the mind has space.
But we've all tried to force it, right? You're sitting there staring at a blinking cursor, just demanding your brain to come up with something brilliant.
And it almost never works.
No.
And that usually leads to what the text calls thin and weak attention. This is a really key concept. If you are trying to focus on a bunch of things at once, or even just switching back and forth, your attention gets spread so thin it basically loses all its power.
Hold on, let's pause there. Because the modern workplace pretty much demands constant task switching. I'm writing a report, but I have to check email and then someone comes to my desk. Is that really destroying my focus, or am I just, multitasking?
You're experiencing something researchers call the switching cost, or attention residue.
Attention residue.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of gross.
It is a little gross, yeah. The idea is that when you switch from, say, task A, your report, to task B, the email, your brain doesn't just snap over instantly.
Yeah.
A big part of your cognitive processing is still stuck on task A. So you're reading the email, but part of your brain is still chewing on the report. You're literally not all there for the new task.
So every time I switch tabs, I'm leaving a little piece of my brain behind.
That's it exactly. And if you do that 20 times an hour, you have no brain left for what's in front of you. The source argues that when you do less, you eliminate that residue. You actually allow for deep focus.
And this is where it gets super compelling for anyone who loves productivity metrics. There's a formula in the source I just love. It says, one focused hour can be more effective than many distracted hours.
That is the key. For anyone who loves efficiency, that's the whole game. We track hours like they're all the same. I worked an 8-hour day, but an hour is not a fixed unit of value.
Right.
1 hour of deep, quiet, singular focus that can produce more actual value than 8 hours of distracted, noisy, busy work.
It's quality over quantity, but for time itself. The benefits listed are pretty convincing. Work gets easier, mistakes go down, creativity goes up.
And that makes total sense, doesn't it? If you're not fighting the noise, if you're not fighting the residue from the last 10 things you did, your brain has the bandwidth to actually be creative. You aren't just processing tasks, you're thinking about them.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Deep focus is great, but our lives demand constant decision-making. Answer this, decide on that. Where should we go for lunch? The force brings up a concept that explains why we feel so wiped out by 2 p.m.
You're talking about decision fatigue. This is a very real economic reality for your brain.
Yeah, the text puts it so simply. Every decision uses energy.
And here's the scary part. The brain doesn't really distinguish between important and unimportant decisions nearly as well as we think it does. So whether you're deciding on a multi-million-dollar strategy or what font to use in an email, every single choice burns a little bit of mental fuel.
So if your day is just chaotic and unstructured, you're burning through all your fuel, just figuring out the logistics of how to live, you're exhausted before you even get to the real work.
Precisely. You're spending all your energy on the menu, not the meal. You just deplete your glucose, your willpower, your executive function, just trying to navigate the chaos.
So what's the fix then? How do we stop that fuel leak? Because I can't just stop making decisions.
The source is a big advocate for simple routines. Now, I know the word routine sounds boring, it sounds restrictive.
A little bit.
But the source argues routines are powerful because they remove small choices. Okay. So if I always check my email at 9 a.m., I don't have to spend energy deciding if I should check it. I just do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you eat the same thing for breakfast, or have a set way you start a meeting, it creates what it calls a calm structure. By automating those little things, you save your best mental energy for what actually matters. The text literally says, less decision-making often leads to better decisions.
I love that term, calm structure. It doesn't sound like it's there to bind you, it's there to support you. It sounds a lot better than chaotic scramble, which is my usual mode. But speaking of scrambling, we have to talk about speed. Because the text takes a really hard line against our obsession with doing everything fast.
It does. It acknowledges that, our culture celebrates speed. We want everything yesterday, the whole move fast and break things idea.
Right.
But the source warns us that fast progress is not always real progress.
That's a heavy statement. Fast progress is not always real progress. Because in my head, speed is progress. If I'm moving fast, I'm winning. What does that even mean? Well, think of it like a vector. If you're going 100 miles an hour, but you're just slightly off course, or you're making mistakes that you can't even see because everything's a blur, are you actually making progress?
No, I'm just getting to the wrong place faster.
Exactly. The text argues that when you move too quickly, you're just prone to stress and errors. You might finish something in record time, but if it's full of mistakes or you burned out your team, you're just going to have to go back and fix it all later.
So it's negative progress.
It's actually slower in the long run. It's the classic tortoise and the hare situation, but for the modern workplace. The source advocates for slow, steady progress. It's more sustainable. When we slow down, we move with intention. We actually understand the work we're doing.
There's a line in here that says, we learn from our experience instead of rushing past it. That really hit me. How often do we finish something and immediately just sprint to the next thing without ever processing what we just learned?
All the time. And that's what stops us from growing. If you rush past the experience, you don't absorb the lesson. Consistency is so much more important than speed.
Okay, so we've covered focus, decision fatigue, speed. Now let's get to the thing we all feel guilty about. The thing we think is the opposite of work. Rest.
This is one of my favorite parts of the analysis because it completely reframes what rest even is. It stops treating rest as just idle time.
Yeah, as the absence of productivity.
And it starts treating it as a biological requirement for performance.
Right, because my default is, if I'm resting, I'm being lazy. But the source says rest is part of productivity.
It's an active process. The text explains that rest is when the brain actually processes information, when it solves problems, and when it recovers.
Is this related to what neuroscientists call the default mode network?
It is, essentially. When you stop focusing, when you go for a walk or do the dishes or just stare out the window, your brain doesn't switch off, it switches gears. It activates that network.
And it starts connecting dots in the background.
Yes. Consolidating memories. The text says, without rest, effort loses its power.
It's like when you're trying so hard to remember a name and you can't get it. It's on the tip of your tongue. You struggle and struggle. Then you give up, go take a shower, and boom, it just pops into your head.
That's the aha moment, exactly. And it only happens when the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's trying hard, quiets down. The source is explicit that good ideas show up when we're relaxed, not when we're pushing.
So sitting on the couch or going for a walk isn't wasting time. It's background processing.
It is essential maintenance. If you skip it, you lose that processing power. You lose the ability to connect different ideas. You just become a task doer, not a problem solver.
I feel like I need to print that out. Do not disturb. I am currently background processing.
It's a valid work status, but you have to really mean it. You can't be resting while also scrolling through emails on your phone.
Right, that's just different noise.
It has to be a true disconnection.
That's a crucial point. So let's connect this back to the output. If we do less, rest more, slow down. The fear is the work will suffer. That I'll produce less. Does the work actually get better?
The source argues the complete opposite. It's all about quality over quantity. When you focus on fewer tasks, you can give each one more care.
Which makes sense. If I have 3 things to do today instead of 30, I can actually pay attention to the details.
You notice things. You make thoughtful choices. The text notes that this leads to results that feel more satisfying, more lasting. And just as important, it reduces that feeling of being completely overwhelmed. You're not just churning out widgets, you're crafting something.
But here's the big hurdle, and I think this is the biggest one for people listening. It's not that they don't want to do this. It's the fear, the FOMO, the fear that if I don't do everything, if I say no, I'm failing, or I'll fall behind. The source calls this the habit of believing we must do everything.
This is the big psychological barrier. We've all been conditioned to think that saying no is a sign of weakness or a lost opportunity. But the expert voice in this text gives us a really stark reality check.
Which is?
No one can do everything well.
It's a hard truth. It hurts a little bit to hear.
It does. But once you accept it, it becomes a tool. The text says, choosing what not to do is as important as choosing what to do. That is the definition of strategy. Strategy is about selection. It's about making trade-offs.
So every time we say yes to something unimportant, we are implicitly saying no to something that actually matters, just because we run out of time and energy.
That's the opportunity cost, exactly. If you try to carry everything, you can't carry the important things well. You end up dropping the ball on what matters because your hands are full of stuff that doesn't.
I really like the idea that letting go creates freedom. It's not about giving up. It's about freeing up your energy to invest it where it will have a real impact.
Letting go is how you protect the quality of what's left. It's how you honor the work you do choose to do.
So we're reframing doing less. It's not a failure. What's the text call it?
A gentle strategy. I really like that phrase. It's a calm way forward. By simplifying, we create room for focus, for creativity, and for calm.
And the result isn't just that we feel better, which is huge. It's that the actual results get better because our attention isn't split 100 different ways.
Right. Sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to slow down.
So let's bring this all together for everyone listening. We started with the noise of too much, that brain fog from just being overloaded.
And we moved to the physics of focus, understanding that attention needs space and that task switching has a huge cognitive tax, that attention residue.
We talked about how simple routines can save our best energy by cutting down on decision fatigue. Basically, put the boring stuff on autopilot.
Exactly. Then we debunked the need for speed, swapping it for slow, steady progress, and we reclaimed rest as a critical part of the work itself, not the opposite of it.
And finally, we landed on the strategy of selection, the power of letting go.
It's a whole system for, regaining control of your own brain.
So what does this mean for you, the listener? You might be prepping for a meeting right now or stuck in traffic trying to survive a busy week. Why does this all matter at this very moment?
It matters because we live in an age of infinite input. There will always be more emails, more news, more requests for your time. If your strategy is just do more, you will eventually break. To really understand things, to be truly effective, you have to stop trying to consume everything at once.
You have to build that fence around your attention.
You do. You have to value your own mental energy enough to protect it, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Here is a thought to leave you with. We talked about that metric. One focused hour is worth more than many distracted hours.
It's the golden rule of this whole philosophy.
If that's true, and the source makes a very compelling case that it is,
Yeah.
I want you to ask yourself, what is the one focused hour in your life right now that would be worth more than a whole day of just being busy? Is it finishing that one project that's been hanging over you? Is it finally planning out your year? Is it just sitting and thinking about a problem without your phone in your hand?
That's the real question, isn't it? If you could trade a whole day of frantic noise for just 1 hour of true brilliance, what would you do with that hour?
Something to think about while you practice your new background processing routine.
Indeed. Go find your calm structure.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.
You know the scene. I mean, I don't even have to tell you the name of the movie. You already know the scene I'm talking about.
I have a feeling I know exactly where this is going.
The hero is at rock bottom. They've lost the big game. The love interest has walked out. The dojo has been dishonored. It's, raining against the window pane. It's grim. And then you hear that first guitar riff.
The drums kick in.
Exactly. The drums kick in. And suddenly, we are in the montage. We see them waking up at 4 a.m. They're drinking raw eggs, which, by the way, is gross and medically inadvisable.
It really is.
They're sprinting up snow-covered mountains. They're lifting logs that just defy physics.
It is 3 minutes of pure, unadulterated intensity.
And that's the promise, right? 3 minutes of suffering, and then boom, you're a champion. You're transformed.
The music swells, the credits roll, it is incredible cinema, it gets the blood pumping, it makes you want to run through a brick wall.
It makes for amazing cinema. But here's the problem, and this is what we're digging into today. I think deep down, we try to edit our actual lives, like that movie.
Oh, for sure.
We think, okay, I want to learn Spanish, or I want to get six-pack abs. And we assume the way to get there is the montage. We think we need to go 100 miles per hour immediately. We think we need intensity.
And that is exactly where most of us fall off the wagon. Because while intensity looks great on a movie screen, the source material we're looking at today argues that it's actually a terrible strategy for real human beings.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. We are stripping down this fascinating piece of writing titled Why Consistency Beats Intensity. And look, I know consistency sounds like maybe the most unsexy word in the English language.
It's not exactly a word you put on a movie poster. The fast and the consistent.
The fast and the moderately reliable. It just doesn't sell tickets. But honestly, reading through this, I felt personally attacked. This text explains every failed New Year's resolution I've ever had.
It's a reality check. The mission today is to deconstruct why we are so addicted to that high-octane intensity, why it almost biologically sets us up to fail, and how we can switch to a strategy that the source calls quiet. It's a strategy that is calmer, slower, but, and this is the key, it actually works.
Quiet but works. I want to live there.
Wow.
So let's unpack this. The source material starts by admitting something important, which I really appreciate.
What's that?
Intensity feels good. We don't just do it because we think we have to. We do it because we like the high.
We do. The text describes intensity as starting with strong motivation. It's a very specific emotional state. You know that feeling, usually late on a Sunday night.
Oh, the Sunday scaries transform into Superman Sunday.
Right. You're sitting there, you're mapping out the week. You decide, I'm going to wake up 2 hours early every day. I'm going to meal prep organic lunches. I'm going to read a book a week and learn to code.
And in that moment, just in your head, you feel powerful.
You feel like you've already achieved it just by planning it.
It's seductive. You get the dopamine hit of being a superhero before you've even lifted a finger. It feels like you're fixing your life.
But the source points out the fatal flaw in this. Intensity relies entirely on that emotion. It relies on you feeling up. And the problem with emotions, even the really positive ones like high-octane motivation, is that they're temporary.
They're weather. They pass.
They rarely last. The text outlines the cycle pretty clearly. You have a few days, maybe a week if you're lucky, where you just ride that wave of excitement.
You do in the montage.
You do in the montage. You're waking up early, but then inevitably reality sets in.
Life happens. Your boss yells at you, the car breaks down, or honestly, you're just tired because you've been waking up at 4 a.m.
Exactly. Life gets busy.
Yeah.
Your energy drops. And suddenly, that intense routine you built, which requires 100% of your energy, it breaks. You miss a day.
And this is a part of the text that really hit home for me. It's not just that the routine breaks, it's the psychological cost of the break. The source explicitly mentions the arrival of guilt.
Yes. This is the mechanism of failure. When you rely on intensity, you are setting the bar impossibly high. The text says intensity asks for too much too quickly. So when you inevitably miss a step, because you are a human being and not a robot, you don't just feel like you missed a Tuesday, you feel like you failed. The guilt sets in.
And I've felt this. You miss the gym once, and you think, well, I ruined the streak, I'm a failure, I might as well eat this entire pizza.
The might as well effect. It's paralyzing.
Yeah.
Once the guilt appears, the progress just stops.
Yeah.
Intensity creates this sort of binary world.
Yeah.
You are either 100% on, crushing it, or you are 0% off, failing. There's no middle ground.
That is such a crucial insight. Intensity feels like power, but it's actually fragile. It's like a glass cannon in a video game. It hits hard, but if you tap it the wrong way, it just shatters.
Precisely.
Wow.
So the source proposes the alternative, consistency. But the way it describes consistency is really interesting. It uses the word calm.
Calm. See, that's where I get skeptical. Because
Yeah.
calm doesn't sound like winning. Calm sounds like settling.
Right.
It sounds like something you tell people who can't handle the heat.
And that's the cultural conditioning talking. We are trained to think that effort must hurt to count. But the text says consistency does not need motivation every day.
Okay, pause there. Does not need motivation. That sounds like a superpower, because usually I spend half my energy just trying to get motivated to do the thing.
Well, think about it. If you rely on consistency, you stop trying to hype yourself up. You stop waiting for the montage music. Consistency relies on habits, not emotions. It's mechanical. The text says consistency grows slowly, but it grows deeply.
Grows deeply. I like that image. It's less like a firework and more like an oak tree.
That's a great analogy. A firework is intense. It's bright, loud, exciting. Everyone looks at it, and then 3 seconds later, it's just ash.
Yeah.
An oak tree is boring. You can stare at it all day, and you won't see it move. It's not exciting. Give it 5 years, 10 years, it's immovable. It has roots.
So if we're moving away from the emotional high of intensity, the fireworks, what are we replacing it with? The source actually gets into the biology of this, right? It's not just philosophy. There's a brain element here.
Right. This is where it gets fascinating. The source dives into how the human brain actually learns. And the key word here isn't inspiration or willpower, it's repetition.
So walk us through the neuroscience here. Why does the brain care about repetition more than intensity?
Well, the text explains that repeated actions create neural pathways. But let's visualize this. I want you to imagine a really dense, overgrown jungle.
Okay, I'm in the jungle. I've got a machete in my hand. It's humid.
Perfect. Now imagine you need to create a path. If you sprint through that forest once with maximum intensity, screaming, hacking away, running as fast as you can,
Yeah.
you might make a dent.
Right.
You might chop down a few vines, you make a lot of noise, you sweat, you work incredibly hard, but then you go home and you don't come back for a month. What happens to that trail?
Oh, the jungle grows back. In like a week, nature takes it back.
Exactly. The weeds take over. The path is gone. The brain is efficient. If you don't use a pathway, it prunes it. It says, oh, that was a one-time thing. Delete. It's looking to save energy.
But if I walk that path every single day,
Even if you walk slowly, even if you're just shuffling along in your pajamas, if you walk it every day, you beat down the grass, then you pack down the dirt, eventually the roots stop tripping you up.
and it becomes a path.
It becomes a path. The source says, what once felt difficult becomes normal.
That is the holy grail, right? We want the hard stuff to feel normal. We want going to the gym or studying Spanish to feel as automatic as brushing our teeth.
And that only happens through repetition. The brain adapts to what you do daily, not what you do occasionally with great effort. That's why the text argues that consistency works better than short bursts. The bursts just don't last long enough to do that physical rewiring work in the brain.
It's interesting because when you frame it that way, intensity seems almost inefficient. Like you're spending a huge amount of metabolic energy for very little biological return.
It is inefficient in the long run. And it's also high cost in terms of stress.
The source makes a big point about the relationship between our goals and pressure.
Oh, yeah. Intense goals create pressure. I feel that in my chest just hearing it.
And pressure leads to stress. And what does stress do biologically? It triggers cortisol. It triggers fight or flight. It makes us want to escape the very thing we're trying to do.
Yeah.
If your goal is to write the next great American novel in 30 days, every time you sit at the computer, you feel the weight of that deadline just crushing you. It's miserable.
And eventually you just stop sitting at the computer because your brain is screaming, "Run away! This is painful." I do this all the time. I procrastinate because the task feels too heavy.
Exactly. The procrastination is a defense mechanism against the pressure. But consistency, the source says it removes pressure
How? I mean, how do you remove pressure when you still have a goal? You still want to write the book.
by shifting the definition of the goal. In a consistent model, the goal isn't write the novel today. The goal is show up. Just show up, even in a small way. That feels like letting yourself off the hook, though, doesn't it? If I just say, my goal is to put on my running shoes, aren't I cheating? Aren't I just lowering the bar to the floor?
You are lowering the bar to the floor, yes. But that's strategic. If the goal is just to open the document and write one sentence, the pressure is zero.
Okay.
You can do that on a bad day. You can do that when you have the flu. You can do that when you're depressed. And because the pressure is gone, the habit becomes sustainable.
Sustainable even during difficult times, as the text says.
Right. Yeah, we all have difficult times.
Hmm.
If your strategy requires you to be at 100% capacity to work, your strategy is broken
Yeah.
because nobody is at 100% forever. Consistency is designed for the days when you're at 20%.
I think that's the part that is hardest to accept, though, because when you're doing that 20% work, when you're just showing up and doing the small thing, it feels invisible. It feels like nothing is happening.
You've hit on the invisible phase. The source addresses this directly. It says, one challenge with consistency is that results appear slowly.
Yeah. In the beginning, it looks like nothing is changing. You're doing the small habit, you're eating the salad, you're writing the paragraph, and you look in the mirror or check your bank account, and nothing. Zero.
It's the valley of disappointment.
Is that what we're calling it?
That's what it feels like. You are putting in the effort, but the feedback loop is delayed. And that is where most people quit. Because we're conditioned by that movie montage to want the immediate transformation.
We want the training sequence to be over so we can win the fight.
But the source says something is happening, even if we can't see it yet. It says change is happening quietly. It says consistency works behind the scenes. Skills are improving. The neural pathways are getting packed down.
Right.
But most importantly, something psychological is shifting. Confidence is growing.
Now, this definition of confidence really stood out to me in the reading. Usually when we talk to people about confidence, we think of bravado, pumping your chest, standing in front of the mirror saying, I am a tiger.
Right, the fake it till you make it style.
Yeah.
High energy. But the text defines confidence differently. It says confidence grows from reliability.
Every small action is a promise kept.
That's the line. Every small action is a promise kept.
Yeah.
Think about what that does to your relationship with yourself. If you set a massive, intense goal, I will run 10 miles today, and you quit at mile 3 because you're exhausted, you are breaking a promise to yourself. You are teaching your brain, I am a liar. I cannot trust my own word.
Oof. Yeah. That's dark, but it's true. That's the guilt again. You start to see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through.
But if you set a small, consistent goal, I will do 5 minutes of stretching. And you do it. You kept a promise. You build what the text calls self-trust.
And calm confidence.
Calm confidence, knowing that you will show up again tomorrow. It's not about thinking you're the greatest athlete in the world. It's about knowing you are reliable. That is a much sturdier foundation than hype.
It's a shift from, I hope I can do this, to, I know I will do this because I always do.
Exactly. And that self-trust is what carries you through the invisible phase. You don't need the external result immediately because you have the internal validation of keeping your promise. You feel good about yourself simply because you showed up.
Now, there's another enemy of intensity that we haven't touched on yet, but the text makes a big deal of it. Rest.
Ah, yes. The relationship with rest.
Intensity seems to hate rest. If you're in the montage, you don't sleep, you don't take a break. Rest is for the weak.
Intensity fears rest because intensity is fragile. If you stop the momentum of a spinning top, what happens? It falls over. The whole thing collapses. But the source says consistency respects rest.
How so? Because consistency sounds like never stopping. It sounds like a treadmill you can't get off.
Not if you look at the time horizon. Consistency operates on a longer timeline. If your timeline is forever or the next 10 years, then missing one day is statistically irrelevant. It's a blip. It's a rounding error.
The text mentions the one-day rule, effectively.
It says missing one day does not destroy progress. If you are intense, missing a day ruins the streak. You know those apps that track your streak?
Oh, I live in fear of the owl on my language app. If I lose my streak, I feel like I've lost everything.
Right, and that's the danger of intensity gamification. It ruins the perfection.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are consistent, you just return.
Returning gently. That's the phrase used. I love that phrasing. It sounds so much nicer than grinding back.
Yes. Returning gently keeps the habit alive. This is so important. It removes the fear. If you miss a day, you don't beat yourself up. You don't spiral into shame.
You don't eat the whole pizza.
You don't eat the whole pizza. You just get back to it the next day.
It's forgiving.
It is.
Yeah.
And because it's forgiving, you're less likely to quit altogether.
Yeah.
It turns a failure into just a pause. It stops the shame spiral before it starts.
It really does sound like a gentle path to real results, which is how the source describes it. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
I have to speak for the part of me that wants to be a hero. Is it boring? Okay, straight answer. I appreciate that.
The source admits it. It says, consistency is not exciting. It is simple. We have to be honest about that. If you are looking for thrills, for that adrenaline rush of crushing it, consistency will feel boring. It will feel mundane. But the text argues, and that is why it works. The excitement is the distraction. The boredom is where the work gets done. It says small steps lead to change, not through force, but through patience.
We want to force the result. We want to grab the result by the throat and drag it into existence.
But you can't force neural pathways. You can't force biological adaptation. You can only coax it through patience. You can't yell a plant into growing faster.
In the long run, consistency always wins. That's the final verdict.
It's the tortoise and the hare. It's the oldest cliche in the book because it's biologically true. The hare burns out. The hare gets distracted. The hare relies on intensity.
And the tortoise just keeps stepping.
The tortoise just keeps stepping.
So if we look at this for our listener, the learner who is probably juggling a job, maybe family, hobbies, and trying to learn something new, the message is pretty liberating.
It's incredibly liberating. It means you can stop trying to overhaul your entire life on a Monday morning. You don't need a radical transformation. You don't need to wake up at 4 a.m. unless you really, really want to.
You just need to pick something small.
Something so small it feels almost too easy, ridiculously easy, and then do it again tomorrow and the day after.
And if you miss a day,
you forgive yourself instantly and you do it the day after that. No drama, no guilt.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. The removal of the drama. We make self-improvement so dramatic. We make it this battle between good and evil, laziness and productivity. And this text is saying, hey, put down the sword. Just do the small thing.
Exactly. Lower the stakes, lower the pressure, raise the consistency. That's the formula.
It's funny. We started talking about movie montages.
Yeah.
And I realize now that a movie about consistency would be the worst movie ever made.
It would be absolutely unwatchable.
It would just be a 2-hour shot of a guy reading 2 pages of a book every night for a year. No music, just page turning.
The critics would hate it. It'd get 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. But the guy in the movie, by the end, he's actually read the books. He's actually learned the language. He's actually changed.
Right.
The montage hero usually ends up back on the couch a month later with a pulled muscle and a sense of failure.
That is the reality check we all needed.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into why consistency beats intensity, let's bring it back to you, the listener. We've talked about neural pathways, about the trap of the emotional high, and the power of the quiet strategy.
The bottom line is that you have a choice between feeling impressive for a week or actually becoming impressive over a year.
I love that. And here's a thought to leave you with, something to mull over as you go about your day. We talked about how every small action is a promise kept to yourself. So here is the question. What is one small, boring promise you are willing to make to yourself today? Not a grand declaration, not a life overhaul. Just a tiny, boring promise that matters more than 1,000 intense intentions.
Because that small promise is the one you'll actually keep.
Exactly. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.
The Girl Who Spoke 7 Languages. Part 1. Maria was 8 years old when she said her first word in a language that wasn't her own. It was an accident. A tourist dropped his wallet outside her apartment building in Lisbon. She picked it up, ran after him, and without thinking, without even knowing why, she said,
Monsieur, vous avez oublié quelque chose.
The man stopped, turned around, stared at her. How does a child in Lisbon speak perfect French? He asked. Maria didn't know the answer. She went home, told her mother, and her mother laughed. You probably heard it from the TV, she said. But Maria knew it wasn't the TV. She had never studied French. Never had a French teacher. Never even been to France. Yet the words had come out, naturally. Perfectly. Like breathing. That night, lying in her small bed, Maria stared at the ceiling and whispered words in a language she didn't recognize. She was terrified. But more than terrified. She was curious. By the time Maria was 12, she spoke 4 languages fluently. Portuguese, French, Arabic, Mandarin. Her teachers didn't know what to do with her. Her classmates thought she was strange. Her father, who had left when she was 3, didn't know she existed anymore. The only person who believed in her was her grandmother, Avu Helena. Every Sunday, Avu Helena would sit with Maria at the kitchen table, pour 2 cups of strong coffee, and say, "The world gave you a gift, my love. The question is, what will you give back to the world?" Maria never had an answer. Until the day everything changed. She was 16 when she got the letter. A scholarship. A full scholarship to one of the most prestigious language schools in Europe, in Vienna, Austria. Maria held the letter with shaking hands. It was everything she had ever wanted. But Vienna meant leaving Lisbon. Leaving her mother, who worked 2 jobs. Leaving Avu Helena, who was getting older and slower every year. Leaving the only life she had ever known. Her mother cried when she read the letter. But they were not sad tears. Go, her mother whispered. Go and become everything I never could. The night before she left, Avu Helena pressed something cold into Maria's hand. A small silver ring. This belonged to your great-grandmother, she said. She also had a gift the world didn't understand. Promise me you will not hide yours. Maria promised. 3 days later, she boarded a plane for the first time in her life. She had no idea that in Vienna she would discover that her gift was not what she thought it was. End of Part 1. In Part 2, Maria arrives in Vienna and meets someone who knows things about her that no stranger should ever know. If this story moved you, subscribe to English Tales and Trails. Next episode drops soon. You won't want to miss what happens to Maria in Vienna.
You made it all the way, look at you, hanging through the chaos and the bloopers too. If you're grinning at the screen right now, guess I did my job somehow.
Have you ever noticed how a 2-year-old will just confidently point to their friend and say something like, "I gave him the toy"?
Oh, yeah. It seems completely normal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They heard an adult say the word gave, they remembered it, and they just repeated it.
But then, a few months later, that exact same toddler will point to the same friend and say, "I give him the toy."
Yes. They add that ED to the end. And if you really think about that for a second, it's kind of wild.
It's totally wild because that child has never, not once in their entire life, heard an adult use the word "gived."
Right. So they can't possibly just be imitating it.
Exactly. Instead, they've subconsciously identified this highly abstract mathematical rule for the past tense in English.
And they're basically independently running that algorithm on a brand new word.
Which is incredible. I mean, they aren't just biological parrots copying sounds. They are like little data scientists.
Which completely shatters that whole illusion that learning a language is just about repeating what we hear.
Right. It hints at this massive hidden machinery that's operating just beneath the surface of our conscious thought.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. You have provided us with a truly massive stack of research today, spanning, linguistics, neuroscience, cognitive psychology.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive is to answer a fundamental, almost, existential question.
Which is, how do we actually acquire language?
Exactly. And why do some people seem to just, learn so much faster than others?
It's a mystery that has puzzled philosophers literally since antiquity. And as your sources show, it's currently driving some of the most rigorous cognitive science we have right now.
Because we're trying to understand the actual architecture of human communication. And, the stakes here are incredibly high for anyone listening to this.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're cramming vocabulary for a trip abroad or trying to reconnect with your family's heritage.
Or maybe you're just insanely curious about the wetware inside the human skull.
Right. Understanding how we learn languages can drastically change the way you approach studying. You can basically stop fighting your brain.
And start working with its natural mechanisms. It shifts the paradigm completely.
Yeah, it takes you away from that incredibly frustrating belief of, oh, I'm just inherently bad at learning languages.
And moves you toward, oh, I just haven't been leveraging my specific cognitive architecture correctly.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to be exploring the age-old debate of genetics versus environment.
We'll also examine some pretty haunting real-life stories of extreme language isolation.
Yeah, those are intense. And we'll look at what they reveal about the brain's developmental clock. Plus, we're going to debate the real impact of your personality and your genetic makeup on your learning speed.
And finally, we'll extract some highly actionable, science-backed methods that you can use today to basically hack the learning process.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with what the literature universally refers to as the great debate.
The big one.
Right. Is language something wired into our DNA, or is it learned completely from scratch?
Well, to understand the modern science here, we really have to start with the historical baseline. In your sources, we see the behaviorist view.
Which dominated the early to mid-20th century, right?
Exactly. Heavily championed by the psychologist B.F. Skinner. Skinner basically proposed that language is simply a learned behavior.
Governed by the exact same laws of operant conditioning that govern any other animal behavior.
Right.
Let's actually define operant conditioning for a second, just because it's so central to his argument.
Sure. So operant conditioning is associative learning based on consequences.
Meaning, you do something, and depending on what happens next, you either do it more often or less often.
Precisely. Skinner basically viewed the infant brain as a blank slate, a tabula rasa.
So in this framework, a child begins by just making random, undifferentiated noises, right? They babble.
Yeah, there's no linguistic intent at all. But eventually, by pure statistical chance, they happen to make a sound that roughly approximates a word in their parents' language.
Okay, let's say they stumble into the syllables mama.
Right, and the mother immediately reacts. She smiles, she rushes over, she gives the baby intense affection.
Maybe she hands them a bottle or a toy they wanted.
Exactly. So the baby experiences this massive influx of positive reinforcement.
And the brain registers a very simple equation. Emitting this specific sound sequence equals a highly desirable outcome in my environment.
Right. So the behavior is reinforced. And through thousands of these micro-interactions over years, stimulus, response, reinforcement.
The child supposedly builds a complete linguistic repertoire.
That was Skinner's model, yes.
I want to pause right here and actually defend this empiricist view for a moment.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because stepping back from all the complex neuroscience, Skinner's model makes perfect intuitive sense.
It definitely appeals to our common sense.
Right. It appeals to our fundamental understanding of practice and reward. And honestly, it democratizes language.
How so?
Well, it implies that anyone, including you listening right now, can master a complex foreign language if you simply subject yourself to enough flashcards, enough input, and enough positive reinforcement.
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, isn't mastering the subjunctive tense in Spanish mechanically identical to learning to hit a topspin backhand in tennis?
That's an interesting analogy.
Right. I swing the racket 1,000 times, my coach corrects me, I see the ball land in the court, that's my reward, and my neuromuscular system adapts.
Yeah, that makes sense for motor skills.
So why should vocabulary and syntax be immune to that exact mechanism? It's just input, repetition, and reward.
Your defense highlights exactly why behaviorism was the unquestioned scientific consensus for decades. I mean, it feels intensely intuitive to how we experience adult skill acquisition.
Exactly.
But the problem arises when we really scrutinize the mathematical complexity of what the child is actually accomplishing.
Ah, right. The math.
Yeah, and this is where Noam Chomsky entered the fray in 1959 with his really famous critique of Skinner.
Chomsky basically looked at Skinner's blank slate idea and said, the math doesn't add up here.
He argued that Skinner's model was fundamentally incapable of explaining the speed, the accuracy, and the novelty of infant language acquisition.
So what did Chomsky propose instead?
He introduced the nativist counterargument. He proposed the concept of universal grammar and something he called the language acquisition device, or the LAD.
LAD.
Right.
And his proposition was pretty radical at the time, right?
Extremely radical. He said, we are born with pre-existing innate biological hardware designed exclusively to process human syntax.
Okay, but if operant conditioning works for, like, teaching a pigeon to play ping pong, why couldn't it work for teaching a child English?
Well,
Why do we need to invent this invisible theoretical hardware in the brain?
the mechanism that necessitates this biological hardware is a concept known as the poverty of the stimulus.
Poverty of the stimulus. What does that mean exactly?
So if you record and analyze the actual real-world linguistic input that adults provide to children, it is remarkably chaotic.
Oh, like it's messed.
Highly degraded. I mean, adults speak in fragments. We stutter. We make false starts. We routinely violate grammatical rules in casual conversation.
Yeah, that's true. We certainly aren't walking around delivering perfectly diagrammed, mathematically precise sentences to toddlers.
Not at all.
We say things like, hey, grab the, no, not that one, the blue thing over by the, yeah, that.
Precisely. The stimulus is impoverished. Yet, from this chaotic, fragmented, imperfect data set, children somehow effortlessly extract highly abstract, complex grammatical rules.
And they achieve this incredibly fast.
Largely without any explicit instruction. I mean, parents rarely sit their 3-year-old down to explain the rules of subject-verb agreement.
Right, they just absorb it.
And if Skinner's purely behaviorist model were correct and children were just biological tape recorders imitating what they hear to get a reward.
They would only repeat the chaotic, broken mess that they receive.
Exactly. But they don't.
Which brings us right back to the toddler acting like a data scientist from the beginning of the show.
Yes, the gived versus gave example.
Right. It proves that the child is operating on internal rules. They recognize the abstract rule for the past tense, adding an ed sound, and they actively, creatively apply it to a novel situation.
They're overgeneralizing the rule before they've even encountered enough data to learn the irregular exceptions.
They're computing the language, not just copying it.
What's really fascinating here is that the scientific community didn't just stop at this binary choice between Skinner's blank slate and Chomsky's pre-programmed genetic grammar module.
So there's a middle ground.
Yes, the modern synthesis, which is prominently featured in your sources, leans heavily toward emergentism.
Emergentism, like Brian McWhinney's competition model.
Exactly.
How does emergentism bridge that gap between the nurture of behaviorism and the hardwired nature of nativism?
Emergentism suggests that we don't need a magical, dedicated grammar box in our DNA, but we also aren't completely blank slates.
Okay, so what are we?
It suggests language emerges from an intricate dance. It's our general cognitive processes, like our profound capacity for pattern recognition, our working memory, our ability to track statistical probabilities interacting with environmental pressures.
So the human brain has evolved this general, highly powerful processing hardware, and the intense social environment of human interaction basically boots up the software of language.
That's a great way to put it. The neural networks literally compete to process the incoming auditory cues, and the most efficient pathways are strengthened.
Okay, so we have this incredible biologically primed hardware. We have a brain uniquely evolved to recognize linguistic patterns and run statistical models on the sounds we hear.
Yes.
But that incredible capability leads to a very sobering reality, doesn't it?
It does.
Because biological hardware degrades. It changes. Which brings us to a massive question for anyone trying to learn a language as an adult.
Does this biological processor have an expiration date?
Exactly. That takes us directly into one of the most fiercely debated, heavily researched areas in second language acquisition.
The factor of age and the critical period hypothesis.
Let's talk about the ticking clock. The critical period hypothesis was originally proposed by neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield, right?
Yes, and it was later popularized by linguist Eric Lenneberg in the late 60s.
And the theory basically postulates that there is a strict biological window for achieving native-like fluency in any language.
Correct. This window relies heavily on the brain's profound neuroplasticity during the early developmental years.
And according to the strict version of the hypothesis, this window begins to rapidly close right around the onset of puberty.
That's the claim. And the underlying mechanism driving this closure is a process called brain lateralization.
Lateralization, meaning the cognitive functions of the brain are separating and specializing into the left and right hemispheres.
Exactly.
I wanted to try a metaphor here to explain how this mechanism works because it helped me understand it.
Go for it.
Let's imagine the infant brain as an incredibly dense, totally untouched jungle.
Okay, I picture that.
Initially, you have billions of unassigned neurons, and you can bushwhack a pathway absolutely anywhere. You can connect any sound to any meaning.
Because you have high plasticity, you can navigate freely in any direction.
Right. But over the first decade of life, as you learn your native language, your brain realizes it's inefficient to keep bushwhacking all the time.
So it starts to optimize.
Yes, it starts paving the pathways you use the most. It clears the brush, lays down asphalt, and builds these massive superhighways for your native language's specific grammar and pronunciation.
And by the time you hit puberty, lateralization is largely complete. The superhighways are built.
And they are incredibly fast, which is why you speak your native language so effortlessly. Oh, but if you try to learn a new language at age 20, you're trying to bushwhack a brand new trail through a jungle that has been heavily pruned, paved over, and structurally cemented.
It's an excellent way to visualize the loss of plasticity. You can still get from point A to point B, but you have to use the existing rigid roads, which is why you might always sound a bit foreign.
The early, strong versions of the critical period hypothesis argued that native-like acquisition past that lateralization point was biologically impossible, didn't they?
They did, but validating this theory presented a massive ethical hurdle.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't ethically lock a child in a room for 13 years, depriving them of language, just to see what happens to their neural superhighway.
Obviously not. But history, tragically, provides natural experiment.
Right. The research dives deeply into the feral child studies, and the contrast between two specific cases, Jeannie and Isabel, is perhaps the most compelling evidence we have for this biological window.
The case of Jeannie is a profound tragedy, but it's deeply illuminating for cognitive science.
What happened to Jeannie?
Jeannie was a victim of unimaginable abuse. She was isolated in a small room from early infancy until she was discovered by authorities at age 13.
13 years old, so she had been almost entirely deprived of spoken language her entire life.
Yes. And because she was 13, researchers realized she was past the puberty threshold. Her brain had already lateralized.
To use the metaphor, the jungle had been paved, but without any language pathways being built at all.
Exactly. So researchers and linguists immediately recognized this was a unique, albeit tragic, opportunity to test the critical period hypothesis.
So they worked intensively with Jeannie for years, right? Providing her with rich linguistic environments and direct teaching.
They did. And the results were highly specific and deeply revealing. Jeannie successfully developed a relatively large vocabulary.
Okay, so she could learn that the sound apple mapped to the physical object of an apple.
Yes. She could memorize nouns and verbs without too much trouble.
So the window for learning raw vocabulary, simply mapping symbols to objects, was apparently still open.
But she never grasped syntax.
Really? Never?
Never. She never acquired the ability to use grammar. She could not string those memorized words together into meaningful, syntactically correct sentences using function words, prepositions, or tense markers.
Wow. So her communication just remained fragmented.
Yes, just telegraphic strings of vocabulary. And this provided massive support for the idea that while the brain retains the ability to memorize lexical items, the specific biological window for computing grammar had permanently closed.
But then you compare Jeannie's trajectory to Isabel's.
Right. Isabel's circumstances were horrifyingly similar. She was incarcerated in a dark room with her deaf mother, completely isolated from spoken language.
However, the crucial variable here was time.
Yes. Isabel was discovered and rescued at age 6.5.
Okay, so she was still deep inside the critical period window. The neuroplasticity was still high.
And when Isabel was placed into a systematic training program, The difference was just staggering.
Unlike Jeannie, who plateaued early.
Right. Isabel rapidly progressed through the typical stages of language acquisition. Within a matter of months, she was producing complex, grammatically correct sentences.
Because her brain was still plastic enough to build that foundational architecture from scratch.
Exactly. It's heartbreaking to study, but it proves the biological constraint of lateralization so clearly.
However, your sources also detail cases that aren't just about deprivation, but about the brain actively fighting back against bad input.
Yes, the story of Simon is absolutely fascinating.
Tell me about Simon.
Simon's case was documented by Singleton and Newport, and it's a brilliant piece of evidence regarding the resilience of the language acquisition device when it operates within the critical period.
Simon was a deaf child, correct?
Yes, and his parents were also deaf. However, his parents had only learned American Sign Language, ASL, much later in their own lives.
Well past their own critical periods.
Exactly. Because they learned it late, their mastery of ASL was highly flawed. They used incorrect morphological rules, they were inconsistent with their spatial grammar, they dropped markers.
So they were providing highly degraded, messy linguistic input to their child.
And crucially, because of their living situation, they were essentially the sole source of language for Simon.
He wasn't getting corrected by a broader native signing community.
Right. So if we go back to Skinner and the behaviorists for a second.
Simon should have perfectly copied his parents' broken ASL.
Yes. He should have internalized their mistakes as the standard, but he didn't.
Because Simon was a child, his neuroplasticity was at its peak.
His brain took this broken, inconsistent input, analyzed it, and naturally filtered out his parents' errors.
That's amazing. He just constructed a perfectly organized, highly logical, grammatically flawless linguistic system on his own.
For instance, in ASL, verbs have these complex spatial agreements based on the location of objects. His parents constantly mess this up.
But Simon naturally systematized it and used the spatial verbs flawlessly.
His brain demanded grammatical order where the environment provided chaos.
It is a stunning demonstration of emergentism and those internal computational drives.
His brain was biologically mandated to build a systematic grammar, abstracting the rules even when the input was unreliable.
And this drive to compute, to structure, and to communicate complex mental states really highlights something profoundly unique about the human species.
Which brings us to the animal studies.
Right, because scientists have spent decades trying to teach human language to chimpanzees, like the famous Nim Chimpsky or Washoe the chimp.
The animal studies are great because they really clarify the boundary of human cognition. Chimpanzees can absolutely learn signs.
They can learn tokens, they have excellent associative memories.
But they never cross the threshold into true syntax. They do not combine signs to create novel, structurally dependent sentences.
The linguist Herbert Terrace, who led the Nim Chimpsky research, eventually realized a crucial flaw in the chimpanzee's communication.
What did he notice?
Nim was only signing because he wanted a physical, tangible reward. He was essentially a very advanced operant conditioning subject.
He would sign give banana because he wanted the banana.
Exactly. The motivation was entirely instrumental and physical. Humans, conversely, are uniquely driven by an innate desire for joint attention.
We have a deeper intrinsic motivation to share complex mental states.
A human toddler doesn't just point at a dog to get the dog. They point at the dog and look back at you because they want to ensure you are both experiencing the concept of the dog together.
Chimps do not do this.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if everything we just discussed is true,
if the biological window for grammar and native-like pronunciation strictly closes around puberty.
Right, if the neural highways are cemented, what does that mean for adult learners?
That is the million-dollar question.
If you are a 30-year-old trying to learn Japanese or a 50-year-old trying to learn Italian, are you just biologically doomed? Do adult learners simply lack the raw talent for language that children possess?
That perceived lack of talent is the source of endless frustration. If we accept that the neuromuscular plasticity for perfect accent acquisition declines, it forces us to look at the hard science of individual variation among adults.
Because some adults still learn so much faster than others.
Exactly. And this brings us to the intersection of genetics and working memory.
Let's delve into the genetics of talent, because your sources do not shy away from the biological reality that some people are simply born with an advantage.
The research points to actual identifiable genes dictating language proficiency.
Wow, like specific genes.
Yes. Two prominent genes discussed in the literature are FOXP2 and ROBO1.
FOXP2, I think I've heard of that one.
It gained fame because severe mutations in this gene cause profound verbal dyspraxia. That's a drastic inability to coordinate the complex neuromuscular movements required for speech.
But ROBO1 is far more relevant to the average language learner, isn't it?
It is. Variations in the ROBO1 gene are strongly associated with the functional integrity of something called the phonological buffer.
I really want to break down this concept of the phonological buffer because I love the analogy here.
Let's hear it.
Imagine the phonological buffer as an audio clipboard in your brain's short-term memory system.
Okay, an audio clipboard.
When you hear a native speaker utter a fast, complex sentence in a foreign language, those raw sounds are temporarily stored on this audio clipboard.
And your brain then races to process those sounds, analyze the syllable boundaries, and map them to meanings.
Right, so a high-capacity phonological buffer driven by genetic advantages like ROBO1 means your clipboard holds onto those high-fidelity sounds much longer before they fade into static.
And that larger clipboard capacity allows the learner to hear a complex string of foreign syllables, retain the exact acoustic signature, and repeat them back with high accuracy.
And someone with a smaller genetic board capacity hears the same sentence, but the sounds degrade before their working memory can process the pattern,
Leading to slower acquisition and poorer pronunciation.
The sources go even further into the biological determinism here. They note that inherited general intelligence accounts for roughly 60% of the variation in IQ among adults.
And this raw processing power directly impacts spatiomotor skills, writing fluency, and the ability to consciously manipulate complex grammar rules.
It creates an undeniable baseline of cognitive efficiency.
It really does.
Honestly, looking at this data, I feel a strong urge to push back.
Why is that?
Because as someone who loves the idea of lifelong learning, this feels incredibly defeating.
I can understand that.
If 60% of the variation in processing power is just inherited intelligence, and I wasn't lucky enough to inherit the ROBO1 gene for a massive audio clipboard.
And your critical neuroplastic window slammed shut 15 years ago.
Exactly. Then what is the point? If the biology is so heavily stacked against us, why are millions of adults spending time and money on language apps and tutoring? Are we just fighting a losing battle against our own DNA?
The data on genetics is real, but drawing a defeatist conclusion from it is a profound misinterpretation of how adult learning actually functions.
Okay, good, because I was getting worried.
While genetics and age define the baseline parameters of the hardware, they absolutely do not dictate the final outcome of the learner.
So what does?
In fact, when researchers analyze highly successful adult language learners, the focus shifts dramatically away from pure biological determinism and heavily toward the overwhelming transformative impact of sociocultural factors and psychological drive.
Sociocultural factors, meaning your external environment and your internal motivation can actually override your genetic baseline.
Precisely. Let's examine two foundational models from the research: Robert Gardner's socioeducational model and John Schumann's acculturation model.
Okay.
Both of these frameworks introduce critical metrics known as social distance and psychological distance.
Let's define the mechanisms behind those distances. What is social distance?
Social distance measures the degree to which an individual learner is integrated, or desperately desires to be integrated, with the target language community.
Are you isolated from them, or are you immersed among them?
Exactly. And psychological distance measures your internal comfort level, your anxiety, and your emotional orientation toward the learning process itself.
So how does this override biology?
Gardner heavily emphasized that possessing deep, intrinsic, integrative motivation, the profound desire to become a functioning, accepted member of the target culture, acts as a massive cognitive amplifier.
Okay, let me try an example. If I am a college student taking a mandatory French credit just to graduate, my motivation is purely instrumental. I just want the grade.
Your psychological distance is massive because you don't truly care about the language.
Right, and my social distance is huge because I don't interact with any French people. So the biological barriers remain high.
Yes, but consider an alternative scenario.
Okay, what if I fall in love with someone from Paris and I move to France and I desperately want to communicate with their grandparents and be accepted into their social circle?
In that case, your motivation becomes highly integrative. Your social and psychological distances shrink to near zero.
And my brain responds biologically to that urgent social necessity.
It does. Maintaining and building new neural pathways in adulthood requires significant metabolic energy. If the brain perceives the language merely as an abstract puzzle, it won't allocate the resources.
But if the brain perceives the language as a vital tool for social survival, belonging, and identity formation,
It prioritizes the metabolic energy to force adaptation, overriding the friction of an older, lateralized brain.
that is fascinating. And that ties directly into what the sources say about the role of personality, which I found so interesting. We always assume that highly extroverted people are naturally better language learners.
It is the most common stereotype for sure, but the empirical reality is far more balanced. Extroversion and introversion simply dictate different pathways to success.
How so?
Well, extroverts absolutely have an advantage in lowering their social distance. They actively seek out interactions. They are far more tolerant of ambiguity.
And they're willing to make massive, embarrassing mistakes in public just to keep a conversation flowing.
Exactly. This guarantees them a massive volume of raw input and speaking practice.
They get the physical reps in. They are throwing themselves into the deep end of the pool. But what about the introverts?
Introverts possess highly distinct cognitive advantages. The research demonstrates that introverts often excel at deploying systematic, highly effective learning strategies.
Because they might be hesitant to speak immediately.
Right. Because they hesitate, they spend more time in the active listening phase, they process the input deeply, meticulously noticing subtle morphological rules and grammatical structures.
So the extrovert is out at the local market, boldly speaking fragmented, grammatically incorrect Spanish with 5 different vendors, maximizing their social interaction.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the introvert is at home, quietly consuming Spanish literature and podcasts, internalizing the exact mechanical structure of the subjunctive tense.
And when the introvert finally does speak, their output is often far more accurate and complex.
Both are successfully acquiring the language, but utilizing entirely different neurological strengths based on their personality profile.
This raises an important question regarding our modern approach to learning, actually.
What's that?
If intrinsic motivations, social integration, and communicative necessity are the primary drivers that allow adults to overcome biological aging, are adult learners failing because their brains are too old? Or are they failing because sitting alone in a room, swiping a screen on a gamified language app, completely strips away the rich, urgent, social survival context that language evolved to serve?
Wow. That cuts right to the bone of the issue. We evolved human language to coordinate hunts, build societies, and prevent ourselves from being exiled from the tribe.
Exactly.
If you remove the tribe, you are trying to activate a biological survival mechanism without any of the survival pressure. The brain just says, why bother?
Precisely. You are trying to start the engine without providing any fuel.
So what does this all mean? We understand the biology, we acknowledge the critical period of lateralization, and we recognize that intense motivation and social necessity can hack our brain's limitations.
So we need practical steps.
Exactly. How do we practically, actively apply this to our daily lives to learn faster? Let's get into the actionable, science-backed methods that anyone listening can use today.
The most powerful practical application comes from the work of developmental psychologist Lev Vyepsky. Specifically, his concept of the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD.
The ZPD sounds incredibly theoretical, but the mechanics of it are entirely practical. Let's break it down.
Vygotsky's sociocultural theory posits that learning is fundamentally a socially mediated process. The zone of proximal development is defined as the specific cognitive space between what a learner can achieve independently and what they can achieve when guided by a more knowledgeable partner.
So, to acquire a language rapidly, Vygotsky argued you must intentionally operate within this zone.
Yes.
Because if I sit alone in my room talking to myself in German, I am operating below the zone. I'm just entrenching my own errors because no one is challenging me.
Correct.
Conversely, if I drop myself into an advanced university lecture on German philosophy, I am operating way above my zone. I understand nothing, my brain gets overwhelmed by the acoustic noise, and I tune out. So the ZPD is that precise sweet spot where I am slightly over my head, stretching my capabilities, but I have a native-speaking tutor or friend providing an anchor.
The crucial mechanism operating inside the ZPD is what the literature calls corrective feedback, specifically prompts and recasts.
Explain the difference and why recasts are so effective.
Well, explicit correction is when someone stops you and says, no, that's the wrong verb conjugation, use this one.
Which kind of breaks the social flow, right? It raises psychological anxiety.
Exactly. A recast is far more elegant. When you make a grammatical error, the advanced speaker naturally repeats your sentence back to you, seamlessly substituting the correct form, maintaining the conversational momentum.
So if I'm practicing English and I say to you, yesterday I run to the store to buy milk, you don't pull out a grammar textbook.
No, I just respond naturally and say, oh, you ran to the store. What kind of milk did you get?
Ah, so you have provided the correct acoustic input, ran, immediately after my error, within a meaningful social context.
Exactly. This gentle juxtaposition forces your brain's pattern recognition software to notice the gap between your interlanguage output and the target language reality.
And it does this without triggering the effective filter of embarrassment.
Exactly.
You mentioned interlanguage, which brings up a huge trap waiting for adult learners, the concept of cross-linguistic influence or language transfer.
This is a major factor.
We assume we are just pouring new vocabulary into our existing brain, but our native first language is constantly, secretly sabotaging and sometimes assisting the new language.
It alters the cognitive processing completely. You are not simply learning a broken version of the target language.
The text gives an incredibly illustrative study involving Czech speakers learning English regarding a phenomenon called number agreement attraction.
That's a great example.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this because it blew my mind.
So number agreement attraction is a processing error that native speakers occasionally make when their working memory is overloaded by complex syntax.
Right. In English, we have basic number agreement. Singular subject, singular verb. The dog runs. Plural subject, plural verb. The dogs run.
Simple enough.
But if we create a complex sentence where a plural noun is physically placed right next to a singular verb, the brain gets confused.
For example.
The key to the cabinets are missing. Native English speakers will often accidentally say are because the plural word cabinets exerts an attraction force on the verb, even though the actual subject of the sentence is the singular word key.
Our working memory drops the ball.
Right. It is an illusion of plurality.
Now, crucially, the grammar of the Czech language is structured differently. The native Czech processing system does not fall victim to this specific type of number agreement attraction.
So logically, you would assume that if a native Czech speaker is learning English, they would have an advantage here.
You would think so.
Because their brain isn't wired to make that specific mistake, they should be immune to it in English. But the study detailed in the research revealed the exact opposite.
It did. Advanced Czech speakers learning English still exhibit this exact same working memory failure in English.
Which demonstrates a profound neurological reality. When you learn a second language as an adult, you're not just pasting English words onto Czech grammar rules.
The heavy cognitive load of processing a second language forces the brain to construct a totally unique, hybrid linguistic architecture in your mind. This is your interlanguage.
The interlanguage is its own beast. It is susceptible to entirely new processing errors and working memory overloads that don't even exist in your mother tongue.
Exactly.
And because maintaining this new interlanguage architecture requires immense metabolic energy, we have to talk about the terrifying principle of use it or lose it.
The science of attrition.
Yes.
Attrition. Attrition is driven by what we can call the exercise hypothesis. The human brain is a metabolically expensive organ. Building and maintaining complex neural networks for a second language consumes significant resources.
So if you spend years building those pathways, but then you alter your environment and stop using the language,
the brain registers an inefficiency. It evaluates those neural connections, determines they are wasting metabolic calories, and systematically begins to dismantle them.
it literally unpaves the highways to save energy.
It really does.
But the fascinating part is the sequence of the destruction.
Mm.
The research states that attrition happens in the exact reverse order of acquisition. We lose our skills backward.
Yes.
Why does the brain choose to dismantle it in that specific order?
It comes down to the cognitive load required for different tasks. Producing output speaking and writing requires intense, active metabolic effort.
Because you have to retrieve the vocabulary from long-term memory, coordinate the complex neuromuscular motor plans for the mouth, and actively apply abstract syntactic rules in real time.
Receptive skills, on the other hand, listening and reading, rely on passive recognition networks, which are metabolically much cheaper to maintain.
That makes perfect sense. So when a baby learns a language, they build the cheaper recognition networks first. They can understand what you say long before they can physically produce the speech.
Therefore, when attrition sets in, the brain cuts the most expensive programs first. You lose your productive skills. The ability to recall words and physically speak vanishes.
But your receptive skills, Your ability to comprehend spoken input hang on significantly longer because they cost the brain less energy to preserve. This explains an incredibly common phenomenon. You always hear adults say, I studied Spanish for 5 years in high school. I can't speak a single sentence today, but if I overhear two people talking at a restaurant, I can still generally understand what they're saying.
That is attrition happening in real time. The brain uninstalled the high-cost speaking software but kept the low-cost listening software running in the background.
So if you want to keep the language, you have to force your brain to expend the energy on output.
Exactly.
Let's move to a final highly actionable mechanism for adult learners, leveraging statistical learning. We noted earlier that infants use statistical learning to decode language.
Yes, they sit in their cribs surrounded by a continuous, unbroken wash of sound.
To a baby, a sentence isn't composed of separate words. It's just a long stream of acoustic data. They have no idea where one word ends and the next begins.
But their brains are running a complex background algorithm, meticulously tracking the statistical probability of certain syllables appearing sequentially.
So if the syllable pre is followed by the syllable dd 90% of the time, the brain calculates a high probability that pretty is a bounded unit of word.
They deduce the boundaries through raw exposure, and the critical insight for adults is that we do not lose this pattern recognition software.
We still have it.
Yes. To acquire a language efficiently, adults must deliberately maximize their raw, unstructured auditory input. You must bathe your brain in the acoustic stream of the language.
Even if you don't consciously comprehend the vocabulary yet.
Even then, it allows those subconscious statistical models to calibrate to the new phonetic frequencies.
But there is a massive caveat to this, highlighted by a brand new 2025 study by Kludkova and colleagues regarding the interaction between prosody and orthography.
Yes, this study challenges a very common adult learning strategy.
Right. So prosody refers to the musicality of the language, the rhythm, the intonation, the stress patterns of the spoken syllables.
And orthography is the written text, the letters on the page.
For years, my absolute go-to strategy was to watch foreign films with the foreign language subtitles turned on. I figured if I can read the text while I hear the dialogue, I'm getting double the input. I'm connecting the sound to the spelling instantly.
It seems highly logical, engaging multiple sensory streams simultaneously. But the 2025 study discovered a severe interference effect.
What did they find?
They found that introducing written text orthography too early in the learning process can significantly hamper an adult learner's ability to accurately perceive and acquire the musical prosody of the new language.
Let's explain the mechanism of why reading ruins listening. If I am a native English speaker trying to learn French, my brain has spent decades hardwiring strict pronunciation rules to the Latin alphabet. When I look at a French word written on the screen, my visual cortex processes those letters and instantly, forcefully applies my deeply ingrained English phonetic rules to them.
This top-down visual processing is so dominant that it literally overrides the bottom-up auditory processing. The text hijacks your ears.
Your established orthographic mappings act as a cognitive filter, distorting the raw acoustic data before your statistical learning software can properly analyze it.
You end up hearing what you think you should hear based on the letters, rather than hearing the actual rhythm and prosody of the native speaker.
So, the actionable takeaway here is profound. Sometimes, to effectively learn a new language, adults have to deliberately blind themselves to their old habits.
We have to resist the urge to rely on text as a crutch.
We have to learn to hear the music of the language purely as sound before we ever look at how it's spelled.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have covered an absolutely massive amount of scientific ground today. We have traveled from the tragic isolation of feral children to the molecular genetics of working memory and the cognitive traps of reading subtitles.
It's been quite the journey.
Let's recap it. We are undeniably genetically primed for language. The biological hardware exists. But it is our intense social environment that must flip the switch to boot up the software.
Right.
While children clearly possess a fleeting neuroplastic advantage, that unpaved jungle, allowing them to effortlessly soak up native pronunciation and syntax before puberty, adult learners are far from helpless.
Far from it. Adults possess advanced executive function, superior strategic cognition, the capacity for profound, identity-altering motivation, and the conscious ability to deliberately place themselves into the zone of proximal development. If we connect all of these distinct threads to the bigger picture, it becomes clear that human language is not merely a utility.
It is not just a biological tool we evolved for asking where the nearest water source is.
Language is the fundamental architecture of human socialization. It is how we connect, how we empathize, and how we delineate our in-groups from our out-groups.
When you commit to learning a second language, you are not simply memorizing a new dictionary of terms. You are actively adopting a new operational framework for navigating human relationships.
Exactly.
And that perspective leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought to leave you with, based on the linguist Vivian Cook's concept of multi-competence.
Multi-competence.
Research demonstrates that the moment you begin intensely acquiring a second language, the way you cognitively process and physically pronounce your first language fundamentally and permanently alters in your brain.
That's incredible.
For instance, native French speakers who achieve advanced fluency in English actually begin pronouncing the letter T in their native French slightly differently. The phonetic boundaries shift.
It changes everything.
Your brain does not just cleanly add a second language into a separate, isolated box on the shelf. The two linguistic systems merge, compete, and irreversibly alter one another, creating a new, hybridized cognitive state.
Wow.
So if the specific language we speak intricately shapes how we express our thoughts, our emotions, and our very identity, and acquiring a new language literally, physically rewires the neural pathways of your mother tongue. Who are you becoming when you start studying a new language? And are you ever truly the same person you were before you started?
That is a fascinating question.
The cognitive models may not be able to give us a perfectly clean binary picture of where language lives in the brain. The data might remain complex. But perhaps that is because human language isn't a static structure that sets in stone. It's a